Chapter 1325. After the Battle of Feng City, Nan Ao was forced to retreat. All the land they had occupied was reclaimed by Wanxiu Union. Ningwu Empire was still unwilling to give up. They chased the Xinyuan army all the way to Taifeng Mountain before they stopped. Nan Ao suffered a great loss. Not only did they lose the land they had occupied, but the 7 states and 14 counties south of Taifeng Mountain all fell into the hands of the Ning family. Li Yaxu even led troops to attack Xiangyang City. In the north, they lost 7 cities. Currently, Li family was eyeing Nan Ao from the north. In the southwest, Ningwu Empire was waiting to attack. In the east, Zheng Empire, which had just recovered its title, was attacking from both sides. The 3 empires were like 3-legged cauldrons that fell from the sky, suppressing the Xinyuan family from 3 directions. They did not dare to go out. Moreover, Shanglin City and other cities of the former prosperous country, under the call of Star Refining Tower, joined the Zheng Empire. Now that the Wanxiu Union had changed its title, its manpower was replenished in time. Moreover, it had formed an alliance with Ningwu. It could be said that their strength had greatly increased. In this battle, Nan Ao had suffered a great loss. Not only did they not gain any benefits, but their land was also torn apart by Nan Ao and Ningwu. It was true that Nan Ao had suffered a great loss, but it was the overall strength of the country that was damaged. In fact, Xinyuan family's foundation was not damaged. After all, tens of thousands of martial cultivators died in the battle at Feng City. They were the higher-ups of Nan Ao's sections. Only 1 fleet of Xinyuan family was slaughtered by Qin Hao. If there was a loss, it would be the imperial censor who killed the 3rd prince, Xinyuan Wuyao. In addition, Xinyuan Wuba was severely injured by Ning Kong, Ning Lai, and Ning Jingshan. Xinyuan Wuba's injuries were very serious. After the battle, Ning Kong described that the 3 of them had pierced through Xinyuan Wuba's internal organs. It would not be easy for him to recover. However, Qin Hao knew that Xinyuan Gaoyan had the Qinkuan earth. Xinyuan Wuba's soul was indestructible and his body could be rebuilt. Therefore, he would not die. It was only a matter of time before he recovered. Of course, Qin Hao knew that Ning Tianxing had acted on the surface to repay him. Firstly, it was to give him the swordgrass. Secondly, it was to thank him for saving Ning Chaofan's life. But in reality, Ning Tianxing's real scheme was the 7 provinces and 14 counties of Taifeng Mountain. That was Ning Wu's former territory. They had fought Xinyuan Wuba in order to conquer that territory. As for helping Qin Hao, it was just an excuse. Otherwise, with the ability of the Ning family, how could they not know about the war in Feng City? But they chose to come to the rescue at the last moment. Clearly, they wanted to borrow the hands of the Zheng family and the 10,000 cultivator union to greatly weaken the strength of Nan Ao. This was naturally very beneficial to the Ning family. Not only Qin Hao, but also Qing Lao. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Zheng family patriarch and Xiangbu were all smart people, so they naturally knew what was going on. However, they wouldn't say it out loud. After all, it was true that Ningwu's army had turned the situation around and saved the myriad cultivator alliance. But there was no need to thank him. Everyone had their own motives. After obtaining Taifeng Mountains, 7 provinces, and 14 counties, Ning Tianxing did not advance rashly. First of all, the 3rd branch had just taken control of the Ningwu kingdom, so they needed time to stabilize. Second of all, the Xinyuan family's foundation had not been damaged, and they still had a huge foundation. If the Ning family continued to fight and drove Xinyuan Gaoyan crazy, then both sides would definitely fall into a tragic situation of mutual destruction. This was not the result that Ning Tianxing wanted. In particular, the Xinyuan family had suffered a great loss in this battle, and their ancestor, Xinyuan Wutian, had not appeared. This made Ning Tianxing even more daring to act rashly. Qin Hao followed Qing Lao all the way forward, sometimes tearing space, sometimes flying. He thought a lot along the way. Dan Ge had entered the southern mountain range, and the only people he could really entrust his safety to were Qing Lao and Zheng Qingqi. As for Ning Tianxing, this person might have certain principles, but as an emperor, he would first place the empire's great cause. In fact, he would only talk about personal friendship with you. Therefore, the Ning family was still not completely trustworthy. Of course, being on good terms with Ning Tianxing was definitely better than facing a hypocrite like Ning Hongxian. "We're here." As soon as Qing Lao finished speaking, the two of them arrived at a high altitude and quietly floated. Qin Hao was a little surprised. He looked around and realized that this was the source of the Southern River, where Coiling Dragon Peak used to be, especially when he looked down and saw that there was a huge, deep, black pit several thousand meters below his feet. The area was incomparably vast, and this further confirmed his guess. However, Coiling Dragon Peak had been destroyed, and things had changed. This place had long been deserted, and there was no longer a grand scene of martial artists worshipping. Why did Qing Lao bring him here? Was this place related to Ning Sangsong's death? While Qin Hao was surprised, he couldn't help but be curious about the person they were going to meet. In the next moment, a whirlpool appeared above his head. The whirlpool spun crazily, sweeping out a terrifying suction force that enveloped the two of them. Before Qin Hao could react, he and Qing Lao were forcefully pulled into the whirlpool by the suction force. It was exactly the same situation as when Qin Hao first found the dragon half a year ago. Buzz. The terrifying sound of wind reverberated in his ears. When Qin Hao opened his eyes again, he had already entered the original hidden dragon's secret realm. The difference was that when he fell in the first time, he didn't know where he had fallen, along with Xiao Han, the old demon, and the others. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Scattered. But this time, he fell directly into the former temple. Looking at the towering primal crystal mountain in the courtyard, the scene of the bloody battle against the 12 palaces was still fresh in his mind. "Brother Qin is here." Zheng Qingqi's voice came from the front. Qin Hao looked over and saw 3 silhouettes and a lone grave. In the past, this was a church that stored treasures. The church was destroyed by him and the old man with the broken sword. The 2 giant steel doors were also taken away by Qin Hao. There were no more houses as far as the eye could see. This time, the corpse of the red-robed man had also disappeared. In front of him stood Zheng Qingqi and the virtuous emperor of the Zheng dynasty. Beside the lone grave, there was a blood-stained person lying on the ground. This person's aura was weak, but he gave Qin Hao a strange sense of familiarity. "What's going on?" Qin Hao went forward and asked. "You'd better ask seniorly first." Zheng Qingqi's gaze fell on the blood-stained body. Qin Hao walked over quickly, squatted down, and looked at the person. "Kid, you've caused me so much trouble." The person raised his head. Under his messy hair, a pale face and deep eye sockets were revealed. It was Li Wanji. Qin Hao couldn't help but feel awkward. He knew what the other party wanted to say, but he had no choice but to reveal Li Wanji's identity in front of the Sex in Golden Light City. Later, Ning Sangsong disappeared while chasing Li Wanji. He even lured Xianyuan Xiao, the 5 emperors, and Li Yaxu away. As for what happened between these people, Qin Hao didn't know. But now, Li Wanji's condition was very bad. There was no need to investigate. He was most likely crippled. That old bastard Ning Sangsong did it. Qin Hao asked. According to the situation at that time, Ning Sangsong shouldn't have killed Li Wanji. Instead, he wanted to pull him into the Ningwu Empire. But now, Ning Sangsong suddenly died in a strange way, and Li Wanji was seriously injured and crippled. Could it be that the two of them didn't talk well and had a dispute, which angered Ning Sangsong and made him attack Li Wanji? That was one possibility. Otherwise, Qin Hao really couldn't think of anyone in the southern region who could kill Ning Sangsong and cripple Li Wanji. After all, these two people were both 9-star great emperors, and Ning Sangsong was an old demon who had stepped into the second realm. Not to mention Xianyuan Wutian of the southern region. Even in the entire East Continent, there were probably not many powerhouses who dared to attack the two of them at the same time. Li Wanji didn't directly answer Qin Hao's question. Instead, he spat out another shocking sentence. Xianyuan Xiao is also dead. End of this chapter. Chapter 1326. Qin Hao was slightly shocked. Xin Yuan Xiao, a 7-star emperor, had already stepped into the ranks of emperors. His cultivation couldn't be underestimated. After Ning Songtsong and Li Wanji, another emperor of the southern region had suffered. Qin Hao looked at Zheng Qingqi and the middle-aged, virtuous emperor of Zheng next to him. The virtuous emperor was the patriarch of the Zheng family, Zheng Qingqi's father, Zheng Yuanhai. Zheng Yuanhai was only a 6-star emperor realm cultivator. The title of Great Emperor was just an empty title. Just like how the people of Luo Shui had called Yi Longyuan Great Emperor Longyuan, the Zheng clan was still relying on Palace Master Yi to hold the fort. At this time, the two's faces were trembling and horror flickered in their eyes. Obviously, they knew about the deaths of Xin Yuan Xiao and Ning Songtsong. Qin hadn't continued to ask. He knew that Li Wanji would explain everything. "Kid, you're really stupid. How could you reveal my identity in front of so many people? I'm the only enchanter in the southern region who is proficient in the path of enchantment. Do you understand?" Li Wanji smiled bitterly and shook his head weakly. The path of enchantment was unpredictable. Which cultivator didn't yearn for it? Even if he wasn't a 9-star great emperor, the sects in Golden Light City, except for Ning Songtsong, wouldn't let him go easily. Fortunately, he was a 9-star great emperor. If he wanted to leave, ordinary people couldn't stop him. That day, I took them to many places. The old man of the Ning family and Xin Yuan Xiao chased after us. I don't know how I offended the Xin Yuan family. Xin Yuan Xiao looked like he wouldn't give up until he caught me. "Chopped me up and fed me to the dogs," Li Wanji said. He felt wronged. Xin Yuan Xiao's behavior was inexplicable. Of course, it was impossible for him to know that before Xin Yuan Wutian went to the East Continent, he mistakenly thought that the spiritual storm caused by Qin Hao was caused by Li Wanji. Therefore, he ordered Xin Yuan Xiao and the others to eliminate him at all costs. That day, after Li Wanji left Golden Light City, he constantly tore space and wandered around the southern region of Guangbao. This run lasted for 2 months. Ning Songtsong, Xin Yuan Xiao, and the others chased him for 2 months. During the battle in Feng City, the 6 emperors weren't present because they were chasing after Li Wanji. Tearing space consumed a lot of energy. Even a 9-star great sovereign couldn't bear the consumption of Yuan Qi. Every time Li Wanji tore a space, he would create puppets with his enchantment technique to distract Ning Songtsong and Xin Yuan Xiao. If they didn't spread out their consciousness and search carefully, it would be hard to find him. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. In the beginning, Li's life was quite easy. Until later, he went to a place where he shouldn't go. Emperor stage cultivators of Emperor Realm couldn't cross the bay, said Emperor Realm experts, and the Emperor Realm cultivators ofs, and would if he forcefully entered emperors. B is Emperor TTS. Emperor Bay was regarded as a forbidden place in the hearts of the southern region's cultivators. It was like Western Liang's Medicine Valley and East Continent's God Burial Valley. It was full of danger and unpredictable life and death. However, for 9-star emperors, there was no place they couldn't go. They didn't dare to go. Emperor Bay was the same. In fact, Li Wanji had been a fallen Emperor Bay more than once. That place couldn't be considered a terrifying existence, but it was a very evil place. This was because as long as a martial artist landed in fallen Emperor Bay, even a 9-star great emperor wouldn't be able to use any Yuan Qi or life source spirit. In the past 2 months, Li Wanji had enough of Ning Songtsong and Xin Yuan Xiao chasing after him. He had no choice but to go to Emperor Bay. Since they had gone to the Supreme Fallen Bay, they couldn't use their true Qi. Ning Songtsong and Xin Yuan Xiao couldn't use their minds to capture Shi Yan's aura. Shi Yan hid in a cave and didn't come out. He wanted to hide for 3 to 5 years to exhaust Ning Songtsong and Xin Yuan Xiao's patience. But who would have thought, when I arrived at Emperor Bay again, I discovered that the entire river was covered in blood. You can't imagine that scene. It was as if a terrifying man-eating monster had suddenly appeared in Li Wanji's eyes. His eyes were filled with terror, and his body trembled uneasily. He saw a terrifying figure above the endless river of blood. He couldn't describe that figure. At first glance, a sense of horror emerged from the bottom of his heart. That person was floating above the river. He seemed to be holding some kind of memorial ceremony. The resentment and death aura in the river were crazily surging into his body. At this moment, he suddenly saw Li Wanji fly over. He attacked without hesitation. With 2 palm strikes, he almost crippled Li Wanji's body and smashed him into a collapsed mountain. At this moment, Li Wanli discovered to his horror that Emperor Bei, which restricted a cultivator's yuan qi, had lost its effect. He didn't need to say anything else. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. The person who killed Ning Sangsong wasn't Li Wanji, and the person who injured Li Wanji wasn't Ning Sangsong. It was the terrifying cultivator who stood above the river of blood and caused Emperor Bei's forbidden area to lose its effect. What's his cultivation? Qin Hao asked. He looked very calm. Even though his heart was in turmoil, he forced himself to be calm every time something big happened. This was almost Denda's habit. I don't know. Li Wanji shook his head. He seemed to be lost in his memories. He tried to recall the terrifying scene and muttered, I was hit by his 2 palm strikes. My emperor bones were broken, and my meridians were destroyed. His emperor intent made me unable to move. Ning Sangsong fought with him for 10 rounds. In the end, he couldn't win. His lifespan and strength were sucked away, and he turned into a mummy. As for Xinyuan Xiao, who arrived later, Li Wanji sneered. He was killed instantly by that person. He didn't even have a chance to attack. If I hadn't used the enchantment technique to confuse his vision, I wouldn't have been able to escape. I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to escape this disaster. Li Wanji didn't know how strong that person was. He just felt that he wasn't human. At that time, he saw clearly that Ning Sangsong fought with that person for 10 rounds above the river of blood. In fact, he didn't hit his opponent at all, and every attack made Ning Sangsong vomit blood. Li Wanji guessed that perhaps the other party's full-strength palm strike was enough to kill Ning Sangsong. But he didn't do so. He probably felt lonely for too long. So he made fun of Ning Sangsong, a 9-star great emperor who had reached the 2nd realm. Ning Sangsong's mood at that time was so sad. He was one of the true giants of the southern region. In the end, he was like a mouse in a cat's paw. His monstrous strength was used for fun. At this moment, everyone was silent. The only enchantment master in the southern region, Spirit Emperor Li Wanji, couldn't withstand 2 palm strikes from the other party. Ning Sangsong, the patriarch of the 5th branch of the martial Ning Empire, who had reached the 2nd realm of the 9-star great emperor, was used for fun. As for the strongest elder of the Xinyuan family, Xinyuan Xiao, he didn't even have a chance to attack. He was instantly killed. He probably didn't even have the right to be amused by the other party. How strong was this person? It was impossible to measure. Even Duanmu Qinghui, an alchemy grandmaster who was about to become a great emperor, couldn't imagine what level the other party had reached. Was there a 3rd realm above the 2nd realm of the 9-star great emperor? Maybe it was a god? End of chapter. Chapter 1327. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. When I become an Emperor Qin, how was also deep in thought. A god-level expert? He couldn't tell. He had never seen or felt the opponent's aura. How could he come to a conclusion based on Li Wanji's description? As for whether the 9-star Monarch realm still had room for development above the 2nd realm, Qin Hao knew very well whether he could become stronger. Yes, of course. Above the 2nd realm, there were not only the stronger 3rd realm, but also the terrifying 4th realm. In his previous life, Qin Hao had reached the peak of the 3rd realm of the 9-star emperor level. If time went back 3 months ago, Qin Hao could also kill Ning Sangsong in Golden Light City when he was slandering Dendi. For example, he could shoot the sunset arrow with the sunset bow. As for the mysterious expert above the Blood River, Qin Hao couldn't tell what level he was at. At the very least, he should be at the 3rd realm. At this moment, he glanced at the lone grave beside him. He knew that a super empress was buried there. He didn't know what relationship Li Wanji had with her. However, judging from the power of the 12 Palaces battle suit, Empress Xian Tian's cultivation was not weaker than Qin Hao's. She was probably a third realm expert when he was at his peak. Qin Hao sneered in his heart. The southern region was really full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Everyone respected the 3 sovereigns and 4 sects, but they didn't know that there were powerful old monsters like Ning Songsong, the Night Demon Emperor, and Xinyuan Wutian above them. However, an old monster like Ning Songsong was used for fun and killed in 10 moves. His cultivation and lifespan were all sucked dry. He died in the Blood River, and no one knew how he died. Did you see his face? Qin Hao looked up and asked Li Wanji. In his body, the serene water spirit was awakened. His palm glowed with water and radiated with endless vitality. His palm gently landed on Li Wanji's tattered chest. With his current cultivation, he couldn't heal Li Wanji or suppress his injuries. However, the serene water could more or less reduce Li Wanji's pain. No, Li Wanji's eyes dimmed. He shook his head and said he was wearing a black robe and wrapped tightly around himself. At this moment, Li Wanji did not resist. He let go of all his defenses and allowed Qin Hao to guide the water force from his palm into his body. The Monarch spirit power Qin Hao had unleashed at the Panlong Peak was ridiculously strong. He was far from an ordinary person. Perhaps he was a great emperor who had recultivated, or perhaps he was like Qin Hao, who had obtained the inheritance of a Monarch realm cultivator. Therefore, he did not feel that there was anything wrong with Qin Hao treating him. On the contrary, it was very appropriate. As for the man who had killed Ning Songsong, Li Wanji didn't see his face clearly. That man's attacks were extremely fierce and powerful. Li Wanji had been hit by 2 of his palms and had lost the ability to continue the fight. However, his Emperor law is very special. It seems to be related to the space law and can freeze space. Moreover, I can sense that this person is skilled in formations. Li Wanji tried his best to recall. At the moment when he was attacked, the opponent's overwhelming power had shocked him. However, as a Monarch realm cultivator, his mind was very strong. He was not scared silly. After he was severely injured, Li Wanji took the opportunity while Ning Songsong was fighting with that person to take the stones beside him and enchanted them into stone puppets. He used the 3 puppets as bait to distract the opponent so that he could tear open space and escape. The stone puppets that he enchanted were exactly the same size as him. To others, they could be mistaken for the real thing. However, when he was escaping, he had a feeling that his stone puppets did not have the effect of confusing the opponent's thoughts at all. That terrifying person's aura had directly locked onto the direction he was escaping in. This meant that that person knew formations. Puppetry mainly relied on the combination of formations to be able to resonate with each other and move freely. Moreover, the fallen Emperor Bei had turned into a blood river and emitted an endless amount of death chi and resentment. It was obvious that the formation had reversed the earth chi. At that time, that person was also holding a strange memorial ceremony. Sizzle. Suddenly, a putrid stench spread out. It was sour and unpleasant. Qin Hao crouched down and quickly retreated. At this moment, the power of his 3 souls erupted at the same time. Powerful golden scales covered his palm, and a blood-red lotus tyrannical fire ignited in his palm. At that moment, there was a terrifying black aura twisting under Qin Hao's palm. It was like a black poisonous snake that tore through the flesh of his palm and wanted to enter Qin Hao's body. Danger! Qin Lao was shocked. He stepped forward and grabbed the twisting black aura. The incomparably sacred Platinum Emperor was swept out and pulled the black aura out of Qin Hao's palm. Destroy! Qin Lao roared. The sacred platinum light around him flickered intensely. The refinement law that he had comprehended frantically melted the black aura. The black aura struggled horribly and let out a ghostly cry that was similar to a human's voice. It was spine-chilling. However, the black aura had been resisted in Li Wanji's body for too long. During this period, it had been greatly weakened. Facing Qin Lao, who was at his peak, it was already at the end of its rope. It was gradually being destroyed by the refinement law. What a powerful emperor will! If Senior Li had not resisted it for so long, with my strength, I would not have been able to do anything to it, Qing Lao said fearfully. His face was covered in cold sweat. It was not just powerful. The black aura was extremely evil and seemed to be able to devour people. Brother Qin, are you all right? Zheng Qingqi hurried forward. His voice had changed from fright. There was fear in his eyes. As for his father, Zheng Yuanhai, he was trembling uncontrollably. He did not even dare to make a sound. His loss of composure was even worse than Zheng Qingqi's. I'm fine, Qin Hao said. He clenched his fist and extinguished the red lotus tyrannical fire. When he opened his hand again, the torn skin had recovered. His physical body was formed by the spirits of heaven and earth. It was no longer the body of a mortal. It was impervious to poison. The origin of the tranquil water was also in Qin Hao's body. It had turned into soul power. How could he be afraid of this evil black aura? However, the Emperor will contained in the evil black aura was not something that Qin Hao could contend against. If Qing Lao had not reacted quickly, he would have definitely suffered. Ha, kid, you are still so arrogant and always so confident. Now you know how powerful I am. Cough, cough. Li Wanji mocked. He coughed a few times because of the pain. If it were anyone else, they would have died long ago. You still have the strength to laugh. Qin Hao glared at him. Li Wanji's injuries were extremely serious. All of his internal organs had rotted away. His blood had been solidified by a terrifying emperor will and could not circulate. Moreover, all of his meridians had exploded. His limbs and bones had turned to dust. In the eyes of a normal person, his physical body was already dead. There was no cure. The only reason Li Wanji could still speak was because he was barely holding on with his remaining Emperor Qi. How cruel! Qing Lao gritted his teeth. Even though he was a half-step Dindi, a godlike existence in the eyes of the common people, he felt helpless and powerless. The Spirit Emperor was completely hopeless. As long as the Emperor will is not extinguished, there is still a chance. Qing Lao, do you have the blue silver dragon grass with you? Qin Hao stretched out his hand. After the battle in Feng City, Duanmu Qinghui had kept the blue dragon pearl in his blue silver emperor. Currently, the blue silver emperor had absorbed a lot of the blue dragon pearl's power. I have it. Qing Lao moved his mind. A huge green leaf appeared in his palm. He handed it to Qin Hao and asked, Is it enough? This leaf contained the great power of the blue dragon's birth. When a young dragon was born, its vitality was boundless. Most of the spirit qi in the South Sea had been absorbed by it. It was a sacred item that helped Duanmu Qinghui enter the Emperor realm. It was also a priceless treasure that all martial artists dreamed of, especially for Tang Du. If he could obtain it, he could enter the Emperor realm. However, Qing Lao was not stingy. He directly handed it to Qin Hao and asked, Is it enough? It's enough for now. Qin Hao took the blue-silver leaf. With a flash of light, he cut his fingers and dripped some blood on the leaf. The blood gradually melted on the surface of the blue-silver grass and was absorbed by it. Qin Hao stepped forward again and came to Li Wanji's side. He squatted down and stuffed the leaf into his mouth. Hold it. Try your best to absorb the power of the blue dragon. It can delay the dissipation of your emperor will. What's the use? Li Wanji's eyes were incomparably dispirited. Under the great path, the dissipation of his emperor will was only a matter of time. However, he still listened to Qin Hao's words. He held the blue-silver leaf in his mouth and tried his best to absorb the spirit qi inside, as well as Qin Hao's blood. Don't give up. I will participate in the upcoming Divine Palace Omen and obtain the qualification to become a disciple of the Divine Palace. After I enter the Emperor realm, I will have the ability to save you. Qin Hao patted Li Wanji's shoulder. It was true that he had been tricked by this person before, and more than once. However, Li Wanji had indeed brought Qin Hao many benefits, as well as a great opportunity. With the dragon spirit Dharma form, he could not leave him in the lurch. Needless to say, when Li Wanji held the blue-silver leaf in his mouth, in an instant, an extremely strong vitality force, accompanied by a faint taste of blood, flowed into his mouth and slid down his throat. At this moment, He felt a warmth rush up his throat and slowly spread throughout his body. Although the speed was very slow, even slower than a turtle's crawl, he still felt it. This warm power was very comfortable. At the very least, when his will sank into this warmth, he could already forget the pain of his internal organs rotting away. Participating in the omen, there is no chance of survival. Are you not afraid of death? Li Wanji raised his head, holding the blue-silver leaf in his mouth, and said vaguely, I am afraid, but so what? Qin Hao smiled faintly, his smile as bright as the sun. Who in the world was not afraid of death? Dinah had died once and knew how precious life was. He was more afraid than anyone else. However, some things were more important than life. If he did not enter the Emperor realm as soon as possible, he would not be able to suppress the rebellion in the northern frontier, and he would not be able to protect Xiaohan. That girl was already very pitiful. However, she followed Qin Hao all the way, and she had no regrets. In his previous life, Qin Hao only wanted to become an immortal. In this life, he would rather betray the world than her. As for Zhang Wu and Han Lingxian, when Qin Hao saw a teardrop fall from the corner of Xiaohan's eye in the auction house of Golden Light City, he felt that something was wrong. He felt that everything was not important anymore. Sunset Peak? It was just a mountain. Sunset Bow? It was just a weapon. Emperor Realm? Qin Hao could become an emperor at any time now. But Han, it was unique. Suddenly, Li Wanji fell silent. His eyes rolled, and no one knew what he was thinking. Brother Qin Hao, my father. Zheng Qinqi stammered and glanced at Zheng Yuanhai. Uncle, do you have something to say to me? Qin Hao said. Ever since they had entered the Hidden Dragon's secret realm, Zheng Yuanhai hadn't uttered a single word. Qin Hao could tell that Zheng Yuanhai was scared out of his wits. Especially when the black smoke had entered Qin Hao's body. Zheng Yuanhai's face had turned deathly pale, as if he had remembered something. The person who killed my Ning Songsong. I know. Zheng Yuanhai clenched his fists. 100-year-old primitive emperor, the current emperor of the Zheng dynasty. At this moment, he could not help but cry. His eyes were filled with hatred. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor. Chapter 1328. Translator, Nioibo, Studio Editor, Nioibo, Studio Intruder. After autumn, the monsoon rains had just passed. The air in the southern region was especially fresh after being washed by the rain. There was a slight chill in the air. In the blink of an eye, another half a year had passed. As usual, Qin Hao was immersed in refining pills and taking care of Xiaohan. He accompanied her to watch the east rise and set in the west, enjoying the picturesque 4 seasons. In the past half a year, although Xiaohan had not spoken, the two of them were like an immortal couple, living a comfortable and carefree life. In addition to refining pills, Qin Hao did not slack on his cultivation either. And during this period, everyone around him was very hardworking. The difference was that Qin Hao could only wait until he finished refining pills, fed Xiaohan medicine, and laid her down. Then he could squeeze out time to cultivate at night. Calculating the time, the signs of the divine palace were imminent. Last year, the vast sacred sword emblem appeared in the northern frontier after autumn. At that time, the imperial martial competition had just ended. According to Zheng Qinqi's prediction, the divine palace would officially open in the southern region in less than a month. At this time, in the elegant bamboo forest, Xiaohan was sitting alone under a stone pavilion. Her bare feet stepped into the clear stream, and her eyes were looking straight ahead as usual. Her ivory-white feet were surrounded by the warm stream. The water flowed quietly, and the temperature was not affected by the climate of the southern region. It was very comfortable. This stream had naturally been specially modified by Qin Hao, including the water quality and the small fish swimming in it. All of this had played a role in Xiaohan's recovery. The area around the stone pavilion was in the front yard, and it was very quiet. However, the scene in the backyard was completely different. Following the stone pavilion to the back of the yard, passing through a row of elegant bamboo buildings, there was a large open space. Rough shouts were constantly heard, and the surrounding space was scorching hot, as if it had fallen into the interior of a raging volcano. At the edge of the open space, Qin Hao sat cross-legged, his black hair swaying gently with the fluctuation of primordial qi. His body was filled with a strange power, and the space within 3 feet of him seemed to be still. The particles and dust that were difficult to see with the naked eye floated obediently. As Qin Hao surged with the strange power, the particles and dust were gradually torn apart and disappeared. At this moment, in front of him, Qi Xiaohua had absorbed her soul into her body. Her body was 5 meters tall, and she was wearing the Taurus Palace's battle armor that was filled with power. She exuded an extremely shocking aura, and she roared out, causing the void to explode. Entered his soul, he raised his arms and entered his body of the Taurus Palace's battle robe, and his soul entered his body, entered studio, and his soul entered palace, entered studio, Taurus Hall, and entered Xiaogu Palace. Entered his palace battle. This divine cauldron was naturally the Great Void Cauldron. In 3 months, the damaged Great Void Sword had been meticulously repaired by Qin Hao and planted in the sword grass. He had followed Li Wanji's instructions and injected 81 streams of demonic spirit qi into the Great Void Sword to seal the sword grass, allowing the Great Void Sword and the 81 streams of spirit qi to fuse on their own. During the fusion process, the Great Void Sword slowly absorbed the power of the Ling Tianyu and turned it into a part of the Great Void Sword. A few days ago, the sword grass had ruptured and the Divine Cauldron had been born. Now, the Divine Cauldron had been upgraded and gained another powerful ability to store primordial qi. At the moment, Qin Hao's indestructible samsara technique was circulating, and the mighty pressure generated by the Divine Cauldron crushed Xiaogu's body. The two of them fought against each other to improve their cultivation. "How many changes have you made?" Qin Hao asked faintly. While controlling the Great Void Cauldron to release the monstrous power, he was also cultivating nomological law power. The nomological law that the indestructible samsara technique bestowed upon Qin Hao is a type of space type, nomological law known as the spatial tear. This kind of tearing power was very different from when a Yuan venerate martialist shattered space. The most fundamental difference was in the nature. As everyone knew, martialists could tear space apart with their bare hands when they became Yuan venerates. The higher the cultivation, the longer the tearing distance. It was the same for the Yuan sovereign and the Yuan emperor. However, they had to use their own primordial qi as a sharp weapon to forcefully tear the space apart. The moment of tearing was actually very, very short. However, the nomological law that Qin Hao comprehended was one with the spatial tear. This was similar to the emperor intent power that emperor-grade powerhouses comprehended. It was a kind of great path power. Qin Hao's spatial tear was a great path. He didn't need to rely on primordial qi. With a thought, space would automatically give way. He was the emissary of the spatial tear. The 5th transformation. Xiaogu raised his head with difficulty and looked at the giant purple-gold cauldron above his head. Under the Taurus war helmet, he was sweating profusely and his arms were sore and numb. He couldn't even withstand this small golden cauldron after using the 5th transformation of the Great Bull Demon Body. Qin Hao smiled faintly and communicated with the divine weapon. An even more majestic great path power descended like a divine mountain from the 9 heavens, pressing down on a mortal body. With a creak, Xiaogu's body suddenly shrank by half. His majestic bull waist was like a bow that was deeply bent. 6th transformation, bull outfit. Xiaogu roared and the soul power in his body gushed out. A dazzling light enveloped his body, and his body suddenly swelled again under the burst of soul power. The muscles in his arms were like rolling wood as they became even bigger. Even so, his bent body still couldn't straighten up. "Big brother, you aren't that abnormal, right?" Xiaogu looked at Qin Hao, who was sitting upright. Qin Hao's face was very calm, as if he didn't use any strength. But how was that possible? Xiaogu knew that he couldn't compare to Qin Hao in terms of swordsmanship. But in terms of pure strength, no matter what, he shouldn't have been crushed by Qin Hao. Silly boy, didn't you notice that your primordial chi is being absorbed by the big cauldron above your head? Qin Hao smiled faintly. No matter how strong the physical strength was, it still needed the support of primordial chi. Once the support of primordial chi was gone, the physical strength would be greatly reduced. No matter how strong he was, he wouldn't be able to display the power that he should have. It seemed that the Ling Tianyu and the Great Void Cauldron had merged perfectly. I'm not playing anymore, Xiao said sullenly. He knew that he had been tricked by Qin Hao. He grabbed the big cauldron with both hands and threw it at Qin Hao's head. It was like a huge mountain falling down. Qin Hao communicated with the Great Void Cauldron with his mind. As the cauldron fell, it gradually shrank and finally turned into a pocket-sized incense burner in his palm. He looked at the panting Xiao and said, "After refining for so long, you still haven't comprehended the Emperor's will in the battle suit. How could I?" Xiao panted a few times and dispersed his soul power. His body gradually shrank as the mighty Taurus battle suit merged into his body. He was so tired that he sat down and wiped the sweat off his head. He looked at Qin Hao innocently and said, "Not everyone is as talented as Big Brother. His comprehension ability is amazing." The 12 sets of battle suits made by Emperor Xiantian were all low-grade Emperor's artifacts and had enchanted spirits. When Qin Hao subdued the 12 sets of battle suits, the artifact's spirits dissipated, but there was still a part of the Emperor's will left in the battle suits. Moreover, the Emperor's will in each set of battle suits was different. For example, the Taurus Palace battlesuit worn by Xiao contained a wisp of pure Emperor's will. It was a priceless treasure. After all, a martial artist's cultivation was not enough to give birth to their own Emperor's will. If Xiao could comprehend the Emperor's will in the battle suit in advance, it would be of great help to him when he reached the Emperor realm in the future. Moreover, after he reached the Emperor realm, this power would directly transform into his rule power. Unfortunately, he had been honed by Qin Hao for a long time and still could not comprehend it. Qin Hao nodded. He was Denda's reincarnation, so naturally, he was no stranger to the Emperor's will. However, Xiao had taken one step at a time. Whether it was his realm, temperament, or experience, they were all not at that level. It was normal that he could not comprehend it in a short time. This matter could not be forced. When I think of taking revenge for Xiaohan's sister and Changhalo, I can't wait to go Nan Ao and slaughter the Spirit Beast sect and that old bastard Tang Du. Xiao's hand gripped the soil under him unwillingly. He also wanted to madly strengthen himself. On the day of the battle in Feng City, Changhalo, Tang Du, Wan Hoodlum, and Yu Gong had interfered and almost killed Qin Hao. This grudge must be avenged. But now, the southern region was stable. The Spirit Beast sect and the Herbal Medicine Hall, because they knew that they had provoked Dangu and became enemies with Qin Hao, moved to Nan Ao in advance and received the protection of Xianyuan Gaoyan. At present, if he wanted to take revenge, Qin Hao really could not do anything to Changhalo and Tang Du. Bear with it. Qin Hao got up and looked at the sky. The person who could destroy Nan Ao was still himself. If Qin Hao himself did not have the qualifications to threaten the Xianyuan family, how could Ning Tianqing be willing to invest all the family strength? No one would do a losing deal. The Knight Luo Palace and the Zheng family had joined forces, but they could not shake Xianyuan Gaoyan at present. Even if they used the entire Zheng Empire, they might not be able to destroy the Xianyuan family. Only if Qin Hao entered the imperial capital first, they would have a certain advantage in terms of the number of Emperor Stage powerhouses and could pull Ning Tianqing into the game. After all, the Emperor Stage powerhouses were the key to the outcome of the battle. Therefore, the signs of the Divine Palace had to be broken through. It was only for the sake of destroying Nan Ao and slaughtering Chang Haloa and Tang Do. Big Brother, why don't we send someone to Western Liang and ask Brother Han and Sister Wanqing to come? Xiao looked up and said, in Western Liang, there is still a group of geniuses like Little Nine, Xing Qin Yin, and others. If they all came to the Divine Palace and entered the imperial capital, the Xianyuan family would be doomed. Qin Hao shook his head, turned around, and walked toward the front yard. In the past divine palace, there was no chance of survival. In fact, he was already very grateful to Tsayogwa for coming to accompany him, and also grateful to Uncle Chidashion. But as a parent, not everyone had the same determination as Chidashion. Especially if everyone came and all of them met with mishaps, Western Liang's generation would be completely finished. It was good to leave Shui Han and the others here. Yi Shui Han, you disloyal coward. Looking at Qin Hao's back, Tsayogwa stood up from the ground and chased after him to the front yard. This bamboo courtyard stood in Qin Lao's palace. Ordinary people did not dare to disturb it. However, only Xiao Han was in the front yard. K.Er, the dog spirit, and the recently recovered Ah-Hei Huang had all followed the old demon to the Night Luo Palace to cultivate. Qin Hao was a little worried to let Xiao Han stay alone for so long. At this time, a group of uninvited guests came to the bamboo grove in high spirits. This group of people directly stepped into this inviolable place. Strange gazes fell on the girl, sitting alone under the pavilion. This small courtyard is wonderful. It's elegant and unique. Your Highness will definitely like it. The leader of the group, a young man with an extraordinary aura, nodded his head in satisfaction. Immediately after, he looked toward Xiao Han. Xiao Han's flawless face, like that of a fairy, entered the young man's eyes, causing him to go into a daze. Jiuqian Divine Emperor. Chapter 1329. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation seizing the courtyard. Although this place is wonderful, it has a master. Brother Ans, it's better to find another place. Zheng Qingqi walked over with a folding fan, followed by a group of guards. With the arrival of the Divine Palace, the major forces of the Outer Realms had rushed to the southern region one after another, waiting for the opening. After the Battle of Feng City, the southern region returned to peace. But under the calm surface, there was a turbulent undercurrent, and dragons and tigers were gathering. The Divine Palace had once produced a god-level master, and later nurtured countless emperor-level masters, such as Emperor Lu. To the continent, it was the highest school and the land of treasures. Who didn't yearn for it? The Divine Palace was not a secret to all the royal families in the four territories, as well as the families with ancient bloodlines. Every time it opened, it would attract a large number of royal family disciples and aristocratic family disciples. They all hoped that their family could produce an emperor-level master. Of course, after Emperor Lu, and no emperor-level masters walked out of the Divine Palace. The aristocratic families said that if one was selected, there was no chance of survival. Therefore, the people who participated in the past were not the most outstanding people in the family. However, this did not prevent them from continuing to send people to participate. Moreover, the talents of the people who came were definitely the best in the family. The young man in front of Zheng Qingqi was a royal family member from the East Continent. His name was Zhong Ans. The Divine Palace's signs were dangerous, and the death rate was 100%. No one dared to be careless. As the saying went, only the strong could increase the chances of survival. Besides Qin Hao, Zhong Ans was a genius that Zheng Qingqi had roped in. Not only the Zheng clan, but also the Northern Pridely clan, Scorching Sun Temple, Arhut Palace, Ningwu, and even the Xinyuan clan, which had just been defeated, were all trying their best to unite with the experts from the outside world. Every single one of them would mean an additional fighting force and a greater chance of survival. But then again, Zheng Qingqi wanted a rope in Zhong Ans, but this person's importance in his heart was far from Qin Hao's. Brother Qingqi, you must be joking. As long as you're chosen by my master, there is no reason that you can't get it. Moreover, it's not up to you whether you can stay or not. Let me ask the mistress of this place, Zhong Ans said with a smile, as if his words were the law of the world. Although he was just a servant, he was here to choose a residence for his master. The place he chose naturally represented his master's wishes. Seeing that his persuasion was ineffective, Zheng Qingqi did not say anything else. Although Zhong Ans had a smile on his face as he spoke, his tone was extremely arrogant. Zheng Qingqi didn't like people like him. He only wanted to increase his combat power to deal with the omens and guard against the Xinyuan clan. After all, it was inevitable that they would run into Xinyuan Wuba's descendants and Changhelo. However, if Zhong Ans wanted to ask for this bamboo courtyard from Qinhao, he might not have the fortune to do so. At this moment, everyone walked toward Xiaohan. Zheng Qingqi did not stop him. With him present, even if Zhong Ans had an extraordinary status, he could not do anything to Xiaohan. However, at the instant she approached, Xiaohan's calm and collected demeanor and the pure and holy aura she naturally exuded still caused the hearts of the crowd to tremble violently. They all sighed in admiration. The woman before them was like a woman from the divine world, not a mortal. Under this aura, many people spontaneously stopped in their tracks and did not dare to get closer. Their hearts were filled with an inferiority complex. "Miss, I am Zhong Ans, the servant of the Mo Luo Kingdom's third prince in the East Continent. My prince crossed the South Sea and came from afar. He does not like the noise in the city. Could you make it convenient for him to stay in your residence for a while?" Zhong Ans asked politely. The Mo Luo Kingdom's battleship landed at Eaglehead Harbor. The group of people disembarked with the wind of an emperor, attracting the attention of the Zheng dynasty. Zheng Qingqi rushed over when he heard the news and personally welcomed them to Feng City. Along the way, Zhong Ans naturally sent people to find out that the Zheng dynasty was the weakest country in the southern region. Moreover, it had just been through the flames of war and had regained its title not long ago. But he didn't care. With the 3 dark generals and the invincible third prince in person, he didn't care. A mere omen of the divine palace was not something they would take seriously. This palace was just the palace of an old official of the Zheng dynasty. In any case, the identity of the people living here was naturally incomparable to theirs. He didn't care who Xiaohan was. If it weren't for the fact that Xiaohan was as beautiful as a fairy and exuded a faint aura of magnanimity, he wouldn't be so polite and take the initiative to ask for her opinion. If it were someone else, he would have just said, "Get lost." But at this time, Xiaohan looked straight ahead as if she was deliberately ignoring the arrival of the crowd. This group of people was not worthy of her speaking. Her attitude was unusually cold. A large number of masters from the Mo Luo Kingdom saw this and looked at each other with dissatisfaction. This woman didn't know how to appreciate favors and dare to look down on them. "Of course, if you are afraid that we will damage the courtyard, you can stay and supervise. And with our third prince's character, he won't mind living with you." Zhong Ans said again. The woman in front of them was indeed stunningly beautiful. It was rare even in the Mo Luo Kingdom of the East Continent. With such a beautiful woman accompanying him, the third prince's mood was naturally very good. The breeze blew her hair, and Xiaohan's eyelashes fluttered. Although her soul sense was injured and she couldn't control her body, she still had her own consciousness. She could feel danger, happiness, and everything. Zhong Ans wanted to occupy her courtyard and asked her to accompany the third prince. At this time, she couldn't move. If she didn't move, she would slash this bastard with her sword. Suddenly, a cold air swept over. As if affected by Xiaohan's mentality, the air in the courtyard became a little bit colder. "What's with your attitude?" A guard from the Mo Luo Kingdom who accompanied them reprimanded with dissatisfaction. "Miss, I asked you again and again, but you didn't say a word. Isn't that too rude?" Zhong Ans' tone became a little bit colder. He had never seen such a woman who was so arrogant and pretentious. She was even more arrogant than him. Zheng Qingqi felt that something was wrong. He glanced at the courtyard and frowned. Where did Qinhao go? Xiaohan ignored the group of masters from the Mo Luo Palace. It wasn't that she was rude, but she couldn't speak. She was now a patient. In order to avoid causing any misunderstanding, Zheng Qingqi was about to explain. "Woman, you don't know what's good for you. Stand up." A guard from the Mo Luo Kingdom, who couldn't stand it anymore, shouted loudly. Purple flames raged out, and his palm turned into an eagle's claw, grabbing towards Xiaohan's shoulder. Presumptuous. Zheng Qingqi's expression suddenly changed. The people from the Mo Luo kingdom were even more rampant than he had imagined. He originally thought that with him present, the other party wouldn't do anything rude no matter what. But he miscalculated. The people from the Mo Luo kingdom really dared to attack the seriously injured Xiao Han in front of him. Bang! Before the guard's palm fell, an incomparably tyrannical force suddenly descended from the sky. The guard seemed to have been hit by a heavy object. His body bent, and he fell outside the courtyard, eating a mouthful of mud. Zheng Qingqi was stunned. Someone was faster than him? When did the people from the Mo Luo kingdom become so bold? An oppressive voice sounded. When the voice sounded, the air seemed to become suffocating. In an instant, everyone looked in the direction of the voice. The person who entered their eyes was a slender young man with white hair fluttering in front of his forehead. Brother Qin. Zheng Qingqi felt a little guilty. Someone had almost injured Xiao Han in front of him. It was his responsibility. Divine Sovereign of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 1330. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Those who humiliate must die. Qin Hao smiled faintly and patted Zheng Qingqi's shoulder. There was no need to explain. He understood. Although he had never gone out, the Divine Palace was about to open. Recently, the great forces of the Four Realms had entered the southern region. In Feng City, Qin had already sensed the aura of many unfamiliar powerhouses. Zheng Qingqi befriended the people of the Moro Kingdom because he wanted to make more allies and increase his chances of winning. Zheng narrowed his eyes and looked at Qin Hao. The guard who was sent flying just now was a 7th-order Venerable Rel warrior. He was already an outstanding death servant trained by the Moro royal family, but he was silently sent flying by Qin Hao. When Qin Hao attacked, even he didn't notice it. This white-haired warrior had some ability. Your Excellency, are you the male owner of this bamboo courtyard? Forget it. No matter who you are, move out immediately. Zheng said coldly. At this time, his attitude was no longer as gentle as when he faced Xiao Han. Even the way he looked at Xiao Han was with a trace of disdain and disgust, as if Xiao Han was cheap. Since this woman had a man, she could no longer coexist with her great third prince. This woman was not worthy. Qin Hao ignored Zheng and went straight to Xiao Han's side. He squatted down and gently held Xiao Han's jade-like feet. He took the towel next to him and gently wiped them. His movements were so careful and serious, as if he was afraid that he would hurt the beauty if he used a little strength. His whole body flowed with love, and he wiped them very slowly. The people of the Moro Kingdom were stunned for a moment, but then they burst into laughter. Wipe a woman's feet? He was a 9-foot-tall man. Did he have no dignity? Moreover, Qin Hao had just sent a death servant, who was carefully trained by their royal family, flying away. However, women had always been vassals. No matter how beautiful a woman was, she was still a plaything in the palm of a man. The Moro Kingdom of the East Continent advocated martial arts and respected the strong. Not to mention them, even the death servant who was sent flying just now would not have the face to wipe a woman's feet. In their opinion, Qin Hao's action was a complete disgrace to the majority of male compatriots, and he was despicable to the bone. However, this person was still meticulously wiping his face. He didn't even respond to Lord Zheng's question. He was as arrogant and rude as his woman. He didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Get out! Hearing the laughter, Qin Hao raised his head calmly. Mo Luo's people were stunned again. What did you say? Zhong asked. He thought he had misheard. The person who should get lost should be the white-haired martial artist, right? Yet, the other party dared to let him go. Before I lose my temper, for the sake of Prince Zheng, you will have a chance to leave here in one piece. Qin Hao continued. Although the people of the Moro state were rude, however, he couldn't ignore Zheng Qingqi's feelings. After all, this person was invited by him. I'm afraid you still don't know who you're talking to. Zhong smiled and ignored Zheng Qingqi's existence. He coldly glanced at a warrior beside him and said, "Let him remember who we are." "Yes, Lord Zhong." The warrior accepted the order and stepped towards Qin Hao while rubbing his fists. Purple yuan qi floated around his body and quickly strengthened. In an instant, he surpassed the death attendant just now and reached the 8th level of the venerable realm, and there was still a trend of improvement. Death attendants of the royal family were also divided into different levels. The guy who was sent flying by Qin Hao was only a low-level death attendant. As for him, he was a high-level death attendant. He alone was enough to deal with this arrogant, white-haired martial artist. This person was not qualified for a top-level death attendant like Zhong An's to take action. Wait. Zheng Qingqi stepped forward to stop him. He could see that Qin Hao cared about his reputation and didn't want to bother with the people of Mo Luo. Otherwise, if he took action against Xiao Han, Zhong An's and his group wouldn't be able to leave alive. In order to avoid destroying the alliance, Zheng Qingqi suppressed his displeasure, pulled Zhong An's, and whispered a few words to him. So that's how it is. Zhong An's nodded and understood everything. He looked at Qin Hao with a pitiful look in his eyes. This look was unusually dazzling. He sneered and said, "Today, I'll give brother Qingqi some face. Su Jinxiang, come back, let's go." The death attendant named Su Jinxiang was stunned, and then the flames around his body disappeared. He said to Qin Hao unwillingly, "You're lucky, kid." At that time, the group left the bamboo grove under Zhong An's lead. When he turned around, Zheng Qingqi's face was full of helplessness and apology. Qin Hao shrugged his shoulders, indicating that he didn't care. A man washing a woman's feet, is he worthy of practicing martial arts? And what did he just say? Before he loses his temper, he will allow us to leave intact. Ha ha. To be honest, I really want to see what he looks like when he loses his temper. Lord Zhong, why did you stop Ah Chong? Otherwise, I'm afraid that kid won't be able to keep his head. He's just a lowly ant. Zhong An's told his subordinates about Qin Hao's encounter. These words were told to him by Zhang Qingqi. So that woman is retarded. I thought she was a princess of a Zhong clan. What a pity for that face. Speaking of which, why didn't she die when she was suppressed by the emperor's will? She's a rare breed, huh? The guards laughed wildly. Zhong Qingqi's face turned red, and he flew into a rage. He told Zhong An's in a low voice because he didn't want others to know about this. And now, even the death attendants trained by the Mara Palace were laughing at Xiao Han without restraint. She's just a lowly commoner. Am I wrong? Zhong An's didn't think much of it, but Zheng Qingqi's angry face surprised him. Hey! At this time, a voice came from behind everyone, and the people of Mara Palace couldn't help but turn around. Whoosh! A ball of cloth suddenly flew over, but it turned into an incomparably red flame and smashed into the face of the Deadpool named Su Jinxiang. With this blow, his entire head burst into flying ash, and a headless corpse fell to the ground. In an instant, the people of Mara Palace were stunned. Just now, they said that if Zhong An's didn't stop Su Jinxiang, the white-haired cultivator would definitely lose his head. But now, the person whose head exploded was a high-level death attendant of Mara Palace. What made them feel even more ashamed was that he was thrown to death by that person with a cloth. At this moment, everyone from Mara Palace, including Zhong An's, seemed to be rooted to the ground. No one took half a step forward. They all stared at the white-haired cultivator. This person deserved to die. Do you know why you cultivate martial arts? Qin Hao slowly stood up from beside Xiao Han. At this time, a terrifying aura spread around him. Qin Hao smiled and said, "To cultivate martial arts, you have to protect the people you love. Is it embarrassing to wash the feet of the people you love?" Zheng Qingqi's face immediately broke out in cold sweat. He knew that the moment Qin Hao stood up, Zhong An's and the others were finished. Dong! Qin Hao took a step forward. His white hair fluttered in the wind. Above the bamboo forest, it was like a heavenly fire was falling down. Fire clouds strangely gathered. Curse me, humiliate me, despise me. It doesn't matter. Dong! Qin Hao took a second step. For the sake of Brother Zhang's friendship, I won't bother with you. As his words fell, the purple flame aura engulfed Qin Hao. The entire bamboo forest shook. An indescribably terrifying heat wave filled every particle of dust in the air. Everyone felt as if they were in a furnace. The heat made them sweat profusely. It was incomparably unbearable. Only Xiao Han. Those who humiliate me must die. Dong. Qin Hao took a third step and his entire person disappeared. But a fiery light flew towards him, carrying with it an irresistible force. It flew past Zhong An's. A high-level death attendant of Mara Palace was pierced through by the terrifying fiery light and exploded into pieces. 9 Heavens, Divine Sovereign. Chapter 1331. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, can you stop me? At this moment, everyone was shocked. They were ordered to find a quiet place for Prince Mo Luo to wait for the Divine Palace to open. In the end, they found a place, but not only were they unable to live in it, but 2 of the 7 Imperial Death Servants who accompanied them were also killed. Su Jinxiang was killed by a woman's cloth. How humiliating was that? Zhong An's and the others looked at Qin Hao in amazement. At this moment, the fire clouds in the sky were surging, and their surroundings were like volcanoes. Even the air they breathed seemed to be flowing magma. Their abdomens were burned and eroded, which was extremely uncomfortable. The bamboo forest seemed to have turned into an invisible world of fire. The man standing in front of them was like the god of death in the world of fire, giving people a heavy sense of oppression. They didn't take the Zheng clan seriously at all. However, the white-haired warrior who washed the woman's feet, was he more powerful than the Zheng clan? How dare he challenge the warriors of Mo Luo in the East Continent? How many heads did he have to bear the crime of killing 2 Mo Luo warriors in a row? Zhong An's long, narrow eyes shone with a sharp light as he glanced at Zheng Qingqi, who was standing off to the side. Kid, I'm going to make you, your stupid woman, and this bamboo courtyard disappear from the face of the earth. Even if Zheng Qingqi stood out, he could forget about protecting the foot-washing man. At this moment, Zhong An's aura bloomed. His cultivation was at the peak of the venerable realm, and there was a faint surge of powerful soul power around him. Seeing this, Zheng Qingqi silently retreated to the side, as if he had long given up the idea of intervening. Because even if he intervened, he couldn't change the fate of the people of Mo Luo. He couldn't stop Qin Hao at all. Isn't it good to be alive? Zheng Qingqi sighed in his heart. Perhaps this was the so-called courting death. The people of Mo Luo had several opportunities to leave safely. Kill. Zhong An's didn't have the thoughts in Zheng Qingqi's heart. In his eyes, Qin Hao was already a dead man. Excluding the 2 who died, he still had 5 people under him. He wanted to see what ability Qin Hao had to withstand the joint attack of 5 death servants. What's more, he was a top warrior with an origin spirit. Following this cold voice, the 5 death servants of Mo Luo attacked. The death servants cultivated by the great Mo Luo Empire of the East Continent were naturally different from ordinary martialists, even if they didn't have an origin spirit. Within the same realm, they rarely met their opponents. They were all extremely. These 5 people were merely a small team that accompanied Prince Moro to participate in the Omen. 3 were death servants of the 3 Luo Mo, and 2 were death servants. One of the high-level death servants, like Zhong An's, also had soul power fluctuations. Obviously, he was an essence soul realm martial artist. The 5 of them attacked at the same time. Saber light, sword shadow, fist radiance. Incomparably violent power instantly broke through this fiery space. Incomparably sharp attacks landed on the burning body. Qin Hao could sense their cultivation levels the moment they made a move and couldn't help but grin. There were 3 level 7 Yuan Venerates, 1 early stage level 9 Yuan Venerate, and 1 mid-stage level 9 Yuan Venerate with a source spirit. Translation to Luo Lord is Luo Luo. Luo Realm, Luo Translation. Luo Yuan. 600 years hadn't changed the inherent weakness of the people of Mo Luo. They were really blindly arrogant. Qin Hao's origin energy fluctuated as he took a step forward. When he moved, he didn't give off the feeling of a stormy sea. Instead, he moved casually like a cool breeze. However, the visual effect was very strange. There were blurry afterimages behind him. The fastest sword light slashed over. Qin Hao didn't dodge. Instead, he raised his index finger and met it head-on. Clang! When the flesh and the venerate weapon collided, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Zhang Qinshi clearly saw the sword light shatter and a sharp ray of light fly out from a shattered sword light. Blood spurted out from the neck of the death servant, who had attacked the fastest. Then, he threw away his sword and clutched his throat as he fell to the ground in disbelief. Another venerate level 9 had died. Zhong En's frowned. Had he been killed in one strike again? The white-haired martialist did have some skills. However, he still had no intention of making a move. His eyes were cold because at this time, the other 4 attacks had also slashed onto Qin Hao's body. The blade slashed down, and a terrifying fist ray pierced through Qin Hao's body. Another palm wind, accompanied by a huge axe, instantly tore the white-haired martialist's body into several pieces. Tragic, it was too tragic. Of course, Zhong En's heart was a little pained. 3 high-level death servants had died on this trip. These death servants were specially prepared for the third prince's participation. They were very useful to him. However, since they were death servants, dying in battle for the face of the imperial family was a worthy death. If Zhong En's had personally killed Qin Hao, he could have killed him, but it would have been an insult to his status. After all, he could see that Qin Hao was only a venerate level 6. Bring the woman out of the courtyard. She's yours in the future, Zhong En said calmly. However, the 4 death servants didn't move because Qin Hao's torn body turned into an illusory image and disappeared bit by bit. After image, be careful. The 4 sensed that something was wrong. A terrifying danger was coming from behind. Your reaction isn't too slow. Unfortunately, it's still too late. Qin Hao had used a water wind flash and quietly appeared behind the 4 of them. At this moment, the golden finger shot out again. The finger ray drew an arc of light and cut towards the strongest essence soul realm martialist. This group of underlings was not worthy of Qin Hao using his soul power. Throwing a towel at Su Jinxiang was just a moment of anger. The essence soul realm martialist was horrified. Before the attack arrived, he felt a chill on his neck and his head seemed to fly away on its own. He didn't dare to turn around. At this time, he would die if he turned around. His reaction was fast enough. He swung the axe and chopped directly behind him. Bang! The light exploded and debris flew everywhere. The huge axe was only left with a bare handle. The axe had disappeared. The finger ray was extremely terrifying. Not only was it fatal, but even a venerate level artifact couldn't withstand it. However, the Essence Soul Death Servant took advantage of this attack and dashed forward, avoiding a fatal calamity. Qin Hao didn't pursue. The ability of an Essence Soul Realm Martialist was more or less superior to ordinary Martialists. This was very normal. Furthermore, the Martialist wielding the axe was a mid-level, 9th-level Yuan Venerate who wasn't much weaker than Xin Yuan Feng. Unless he used his own Yuan Venerate level, it would be impossible to kill him in one blow. However, the other 3 didn't have as fast a reaction as the axe-wielding Martialist. Even though their minds could keep up, their bodies' strength and speed were far behind. The finger ray flashed and another person fell. It was incomparably easy. Sir, this person is abnormal. The Death Servant, who had thrown away the axe, shouted in horror. This shout was equivalent to a plea for help. If Zhong En's didn't make a move, it would obviously be difficult for them to take down Qin Hao. Let's stop here. Zhong En stepped forward and finally made his move. In just a few short moments, 2 more people had died. Although the Death Servants were proud of their deaths, they had to die a worthy death. Even a fool could guess that Qin Hao wasn't an ordinary martialist, and his movement technique was extremely strange. If Zhong En still didn't make a move, his men would really be wiped out. A ferocious palm energy shot out, slamming down on Qin Hao's path. This palm strike was meant to block his path of slaughtering the Death Servants. Who do you think you were to stop, just because you say so? Qin Hao turned a blind eye to it. His movement technique flashed, and he disappeared once again. When he reappeared, he was already standing face to face with a death servant. The death servant looked as if he had seen a ghost and couldn't help but scream in fright. Puffed. The finger ray flashed, but he couldn't scream in the end. His throat was pierced by the finger ray. The third person was dead. Impudent. Zhong An's tense face was filled with anger. His palm strike was completely ineffective. The white-haired youth was disdainful of him. He wanted to save him, but Qin Hao wouldn't allow it. If Qin Hao wanted to kill him, Zhong An couldn't stop him. Boom! Raging flames of anger gushed out as his peak level 9 cultivation erupted without holding back. Zhong An's face was full of anger. He took a step forward, and his body seemed to cross the void. In an instant, he arrived in front of Qin Hao and grabbed his neck. Qin Hao smiled faintly. A peak Yuan Venerate? Even if he was an essence soul realm genius, how could he compare to Xin Yuan Wuiying? If Dindu wanted to kill him, even a ruler realm martialist who had comprehended emperor intent couldn't stop him. Who was Zhong An's? Zhong An's used the aqua wind step. When he reached out and clenched his fist, he did indeed grab something. However, what he grabbed was still a shadow. Qin Hao's shadow dissipated under his palm. As for Qin Hao himself, he struck out with his finger again, piercing through the forehead of the last low-level death attendant. Zhong An felt extraordinarily humiliated. However, Qin Hao didn't stop. He was already moving toward the martialist wielding the axe. His footsteps were still as casual as a breeze. However, these footsteps made the axe-wielding martialist feel extremely uncomfortable. It was like a dance of death was approaching, causing his psychological defenses to collapse. Divine Elephant Soul, open for me. The axe-wielding martialist roared. Under such pressure, he had no choice but to open his own source soul. Rays of light blossomed behind him, and the shadow of a huge elephant trampled in the air. Every step seemed to cause the void to collapse. The momentum was astonishing. When a mid-level level 9 Yuan Venerate released his origin source soul, his combat strength would increase instantly. It would surpass the ruler realm and be comparable to a peak level 1 Yuan Venerate. After the origin source soul was absorbed into the body, the martialist would undergo a second transformation. His strength would increase again, and he would have the strength of a level 3 Yuan Venerate. A level 3 Yuan Venerate was enough to run amok. At this moment, the axe-wielding martialist was bursting with confidence. How could he be afraid of Qin Hao? No matter how strange his movement technique was or how monstrous his finger technique was, when his divine elephant stomped down, Qin Hao would be turned into a bloody pulp. Die! The axe-wielding martialist roared. He didn't have time to absorb the origin source soul into his body. Qin Hao's speed was too fast. However, even if he didn't undergo a second transformation, his origin source soul would be enough to send this arrogant fellow to hell. Roar! The divine elephant roared. The gigantic phantom lifted its front foot high, and a surge of energy surged beneath its foot as it stomped down towards Qin Hao. At this moment, crackling sounds of sonic booms rang out unceasingly in the air. Even the earth seemed to have sensed the terrifying might of this attack, and it began to tremble. Zhong An, who was about to make a move, stopped when he saw this. The axe-wielding martialist cultivation was second only to his. Now that his origin source soul had been activated, it was comparable to a peak level 1 Yuan Venerate. No matter how special and strange the foot-washing man's cultivation technique was, how could a fancy cultivation technique match the might of a mighty origin source soul? Indeed, under normal circumstances, using the indestructible samsara technique would allow a level 6 Yuan Venerate like Qin Hao to contend with the divine elephant martialist at best. However, it was obviously impossible for him to kill his opponent in a second. Unfortunately, Qin Hao himself was also a level 1 Yuan Venerate. Bang! There was a deafening explosion. When the divine elephant stomped down, Qin Hao clenched his fingers into a fist. He He raised his arm and punched out. A wisp of golden scales flashed on the surface of his fist. This punch was earth-shattering. The purple-golden fist light penetrated the giant foot of the divine elephant, along its thigh, and smashed its head. The huge shadow of the divine elephant was torn apart under the fist light. The divine elephant martialist, who seemed to have also been bombarded by the fist light, let out a tragic cry as his body was thrown high into the air. When the divine elephant was annihilated, he also disappeared above the void. At this point, the 7mo Luo warriors were all killed. Zhong An's was instantly stunned. He looked at the fist light that gradually dissipated in the void and even forgot to be angry. Zheng Qingqi helplessly shook his head, as if this was within his expectations. It was a pity that the 7 devil Luo kingdom death servants had died. If these 7 scapegoats were alive, they might have been able to play a more valuable role when the signs were activated. Yo, what a gorgeous firework. Do you have any more? Let me set one off later. At this time, Xiaoguo walked over with a cheeky smile. When he passed by Zhong An's, he raised his eyebrows provocatively and then rolled his eyes at Qin Hao with some dissatisfaction. He was just a few steps late. Couldn't he have waited for him to attack together? Chapter 1332. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, what an arrogant fellow. The backyard and the front yard were separated by a row of bamboo buildings. They were only a few steps away from each other, so they didn't even have a chance to show off. Xiaoguo had personally experienced the might of a battle array after experiencing the great battle in Feng City. Individual power was insignificant in the face of the general situation. He had benefited a lot from that battle. Recently, he had been cultivating very hard in order to prepare for the arrival of the Omen. Although he hadn't comprehended the Emperor intent contained in the Taurus Palace's battle armor, his cultivation base had improved a lot, and he had already stepped into the 7th level Venerate. Qin Hao had been refining pills while taking care of Xiaohan. Not only had he not fallen behind in his cultivation, but he had improved even faster. Currently, there was only one level between the two of them, and Xiaoguo was about to be overtaken. Obviously, the pressure of the Sacred Palace Omen had made Qin Hao's burden heavier. In private, he was working harder than Xiaoguo. However, in just a few steps, the aura of a 7th level Venerate had evaporated into thin air, which still terrified Xiaoguo. He glanced at Qin Hao strangely. As his cultivation base improved, his big brother's combat strength became more and more terrifying. Fortunately, there was still one person left in front of him. Zhong An's faint soul power fluctuations made Xiaoguo not dare underestimate him. His soul power was very strong, and his opponent's aura was at the peak of the Venerate level. Xiaoguo was a 7th level Yuan Venerate, so he was 3 levels weaker. Unless their soul powers restrained each other, he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat him. Well, let boss continue. Zhong An didn't care about the provocation on Xiaoguo's face. He was in a daze for a while. He wasn't surprised that he had killed a low-level death servant and a high-level death servant. Based on the abilities that Qin Hao had displayed, this person's movement techniques were strange, and the power of his finger techniques was very shocking. The grade of his techniques wasn't low, and they were all extremely lethal techniques. However, killing a divine elephant martialist with a single punch made Zhong An solemn. It should be known that as a top-level death servant, he couldn't do anything to that divine elephant martialist without using his soul power. Qin Hao, on the other hand, was able to kill him with a single punch, so clean and efficient. Not only was this person's cultivation technique powerful, he was also a rare essence soul martial artist, and his essence soul was extremely strong. Zhong An thought of many things. At this moment, even he did not have much confidence in taking down Qin Hao. Take me to your master. Qin Hao looked at Zhong An coldly, giving him time to organize his thoughts. 7 death servants were not enough for them to redeem the crime of attacking Xiaohan. What Qin Hao wanted was to ferret out the prince of the Mara Palace. Zhong An was startled again. Looking for the 3rd prince? What was this white-haired martial artist trying to do? Could it be that he thought that he could do anything to the 3rd prince? Are you sure? Zhong and sneered. Killing the 7 death servants of the royal Mara family was a capital offense in the first place. He hadn't hardened his heart to punish Qin Hao yet. White Hair, on the other hand, did not give up and insisted on meeting his master. To seek an explanation? I think it's still not too late for you to escape now. Zhong and sneered. Based on Qin Hao's ability to kill the divine elephant martialists, Zhong and might not be able to stop him if he escaped now. Zheng Qingqi was not just a decoration in the Zheng family's palace. Zhong Ans was still unaware of Qin Hao's true identity. His six-fingered fist had killed so many Yuan venerates, including a level 9 essence soul martialist. This was enough to prove that this person was not a nobody. At the very least, he should be someone that Zheng Qingqi relied heavily on. Would the Zheng family allow the white-haired martial artist to die? If he made a move, Zheng Qingqi would not sit idly by. Of course, Zhong Ans was not afraid that Zheng Qingqi would kill him to silence him. After all, his identity was very different from the death servants. He had followed Zheng Qingqi on this trip and disappeared without a trace. How could Prince Imo Xian not investigate? The great Zheng did not have the guts to go against the East Continent's Mara nation. Therefore, Qin Hao's only way out was to escape. If you think this is a joke, I don't mind sending you on your way. Qin Hao took a step forward with a sharp look in his eyes. What do you think, Brother Qingqi? Zhong Ans glanced at Zheng Qingqi. He wanted to see what the Zheng family's attitude was. I can't do anything about it. Zheng Qingqi smiled helplessly. The Zheng family had regained its throne and title because of Qin Hao. How could he do anything about it? All right, don't regret it. Zhong Ans turned around and flew away. The Zheng family did not care. Fine, the prince was in the city. Would the white-haired martial artist have the guts to follow? Qin Hao and Sioba followed. Back in the East Continent, Dinda's name had shocked everyone. Why would he be afraid of a small nation like Mara Nation? Second young master, what should we do? A middle-aged martial artist asked nervously. The old servant of the Zheng family was still used to addressing Zheng Qingqi as such. Guard the courtyard and don't let anyone enter. Also, find some maids to take care of Princess Jingwei. Zheng Qingqi raised his yuan qi and stepped into the air to chase after the 3 figures in front of him. Feng City, Tianshui Street. There were 2 luxurious restaurants on Tianshui Street. One was Junwang Restaurant, and the other was Huangshan Court. The 2 magnificent restaurants stood opposite each other. They were both extraordinarily grand and filled with guests. It was as if the sun and moon were competing for glory. It was rumored that the owners of the 2 restaurants were originally a couple. However, for some reason, their marriage was cut off. The mistress of the house was injured and built Huangshan Court. As for the male owner, he seemed to be constantly thinking about his true love. Therefore, he built Junwang Restaurant. No one knew what had happened between the 2 of them, but they could tell that the couple still cared about each other. Because the mistress of Huangshan Court had never married, and the male owner of Junwang Restaurant had not married for many years. Even though they cared about each other, the 2 of them could not put aside their pride. Perhaps they wanted to fight for their pride and make the other party admit defeat. Therefore, they worked hard to manage their businesses, making Huangshan Court and Junwang Restaurant stand against each other. At this time, on the top floor of Huangshan Court, which had a serene floral fragrance and an elegant style, a black-clothed youth sat facing the window. The youth's black hair hung over his shoulders, and his eyebrows were slender and long. His resolute and handsome face looked very tough. At a glance, his appearance gave people a feeling of extraordinary grandeur. Wearing black clothes, he invisibly added a bit of domineering aura. The youth sat quietly with a guqin laid flat under him. His 10 fingers slowly plucked the strings. The guqin music was like a quiet stream, exceptionally comfortable to the ears. The guqin music was extremely harmonious with the serene style of Huangshan Court. It was as if sitting in the building and listening to the guqin could make people forget all the troubles in the world and only be willing to indulge in the music. There were no windows on the top floor of Huangshan Court. Opposite the youth, it was extremely spacious and open, directly facing the main street. He was playing the guqin on the top floor, and the pedestrians on the street could be seen at a glance. At this time, the street was filled with the figures of the common people. Among them, there was no lack of young ladies from famous families in Feng City. They looked at the man playing the guqin on the top floor, completely intoxicated. But this man could only let them watch from afar. No one dared to have the illusion of being with him, because the man playing the guqin was the third prince of the Maluo state in the East Continent. He was as noble as the son of heaven. Even the young ladies of the famous families in Feng City would feel inferior and could only look up to him. There was no one around the third prince of the Maluo state. On this trip, all his subordinates were on the second or third floor below the top floor. Even the three devil generals closest to him, except for Zhong, Enzu left with Zheng Qingqi, Lu Bingyan, and Gu Kuei, did not dare to enter the top floor, so as not to disturb Prince Mo Xian's intoxication with music. Of course, so many common people crowded Tianshui Street. It was not because of Mo Xian alone. On the top floor of the Junwang building opposite, there was also a person with a very high status. And that person, compared to Mo Xian, was not the slightest bit weaker. Prince Mo Xian of the great Maluo state. With such temperament and musical attainments, even a #1 musical genius of the southern region, Changhalo, may not be his match. Someone on the top floor of the Junwang building spoke. To the common people below, this person was no stranger. He was the grandson of the former elder of the right, Xiang Bu, of the 10,000 Cultivators Union, Xiang Mo. At this moment, beside Xiang Mo sat a noble young man in brocade robes. This young man also came from the East Continent. His eyebrows were like swords, and his face was stiff. He did not smile, and his entire body exuded a sharp aura. No one dared to approach him. He just sat there calmly, like an ancient ferocious beast ready to devour people. If Qin Hao were here, he would definitely recognize this person. It was Zhou Wudao of the East Continent. Of course, Brother Zhou's aura is even better than Prince Mo Xian's. Xiang Mo smiled apologetically. Zhou Wudao, the second prince of the great Zhou Empire, 30 years old. His current cultivation level had reached the second level of the Emperor stage. Such a high status and such a terrifying cultivation level. Compared to him, Xiang Mo was like an ant. The cultivators of the East Continent had always been respected by the people of the three regions. Mo Xian and Zhou Wudao were both princes of the empire. Xiang Mo did not dare to provoke either of them. With the arrival of the Divine Palace, all the princes of the great empires and the geniuses of the ancient clans had come to the southern mountain range. On this trip, Zhou Wudao and Mo Xian entered the Zheng Empire from the East Continent at the same time. Naturally, they were highly valued by the Zheng clan. Therefore, Zheng Qingqi was ordered to accompany Mo Xian while Xiang Mo received Zhou Wudao. Now, Xiang Bu was the Minister of Military Affairs of the Zheng Empire and was in charge of the entire army. His grandson naturally had enough qualifications to sit beside Zhou Wudao. Of course, this was from the perspective of the Zheng clan and Xiang Bu. However, from the moment Zhou Wudao stepped into Feng City, he did not even look at Xiang Mo. In Zhou Wudao's eyes, there was only Mo Xian, who sat at the same height as him, on the top floor of the Huang Xiangwan building. The great Zhou Empire and the Mo Luo Empire had always been enemies. On this trip, they came together to participate in the Divine Palace. Along the way, Zhou Wudao was always paying attention to Mo Xian. Seeing that Zhou Wudao did not say anything, Xiang Mo felt awkward. How could he not know that Zhou Wudao did not take him seriously? And Zhou Wudao did have the capital and arrogance to look down on him. However, speaking of arrogance, Qin Hao's face involuntarily appeared in Xiang Mo's mind. In the Golden Light City, he crushed Changhalo and the other three geniuses of the southern mountain range in one battle. He trampled on Xianyuan Feng and killed Xianyuan Wuying's son in front of him. He was the master of the Shiliang Dange. Qin Hao was also an arrogant guy who made people want to beat him up. It was a pity that Xiang Mo could not beat Qin Hao. If Qin Hao was here, it would be fun. Xiang Mo want to see who was more arrogant, Zhou Wudao or Qin Hao, who had turned the southern mountain range upside down. The divine palace is full of danger. On the day when it opens, the Zheng prince will inevitably need Brother Zhou to take care of him. Of course, there are some strong people in the Zheng clan. One of them has a similar temperament as Brother Zhou. This person is extremely arrogant and does not even take me seriously. If Brother Zhou sees him in the future, you must teach him well. Xiang Mo said. He was secretly happy. He could not beat Qin Hao. If Zhou Wudao was willing to beat him up, it would be wonderful. Jiutian Divine Emperor. Chapter 1333. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios' old enemies meet again, not interested. Zhou Wudao looked ahead and finished the wine in his cup in one gulp. Even as he drank, he stared at Mo Xian. Brother Zhou, don't underestimate this person. He's invincible in the same realm, and he rarely finds an opponent who's 5 levels higher than him. 3 geniuses from the southern region joined forces to fight against him, but they were still defeated. He even boasted that he could suppress an entire generation. Xiang Mo continued. Zhou Wudao was a genius from the eastern continent. He had been taught well since he was young, so he naturally had a wide range of knowledge. With such pride, it was difficult for ordinary people to enter his eyes. However, Qin Hao was definitely not an ordinary martial artist. If you want him to die, tell him to come find me. Zhou Wudao's cold eyes glanced at Xiang Mo. His chatter annoyed Xiang Mo. Xiang Mo's smile froze on his face. He asked carefully, "It's not that serious, right?" He did not like Qin Hao, but he could not kill him because of this. After all, there was no deep hatred between them. The Zheng clan had regained their position, and everyone was united. If Qin Hao died, the advantage that Zheng Guogang had gained would instantly collapse. As long as Qin Hao was alive, they could continue to maintain a friendly relationship with Ningwu and let the experts of Nightnet Palace rest assured. No one dares to joke in front of me. Zhou Wudao's eyes were so sharp that Xiang Mo did not dare to look at him directly. Was challenging someone who was 5 levels higher than him very strong? Zhou Wudao had 2 fate spirits. The second soul was an ancient Tao Tai. Once the evil spirit appeared, how could he survive? Ever since he was born, no one who had the qualifications to help him activate his second soul had ever lived. There was only one person that Zhou Wudao did not want to talk about. If that's the case, forget it. Xiang Mo smiled apologetically. Although I really want to teach him a lesson, he's not that bad. Moreover, he's the son-in-law of the northern border Liao country, the son-in-law of the martial emperor. If something happens to him, I won't be able to explain it. After hearing Xiang Mo's words, Zhou Wudao's heart was filled with disdain. However, his body suddenly trembled as he asked, "Who did you say he is?" In Zhou Wudao's mind, the face of a young man with white hair, fluttering in front of his forehead, involuntarily appeared. Could it be? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Right at this moment, 3 auras flew over and interrupted their conversation. On the streets of Tianshui Street, there was an uproar from the people. Feng City was the imperial city of the Zheng dynasty. Not to mention ordinary people, even those with high status were forbidden from flying. Now that there were many foreign experts in the city, even they did not dare to break the rules. Firstly, it was to show respect to the Zheng clan. Secondly, it was to avoid attracting the attention of other powerful clans and cause unnecessary trouble. At this moment, someone dared to fly in the air. Clearly, their status was not ordinary. At this moment, all the citizens in the city looked up. When they saw the figure in the sky, clearly, they were relieved. It was him. He led the sky cavalry to confront the Xianyuan army and destroyed more than 10 warships, successfully hindering the enemy's advance and protecting the hero of Feng City, Dan Ge. In an instant, the city was filled with the cries of the common people. Dan Ge's position in the hearts of the common people was extremely high, not at all inferior to the current Zheng clan. If it were not for Qin Hao, Feng City would have been destroyed, and the common people would have been turned into rotting corpses. They would not even have been buried. There was no shortage of geniuses in the world. Not all geniuses could be called heroes, and not every genius could emit a bright light in the vast battlefield. No matter how strong one's power was, it was still insignificant in the face of the general trend, unless it was a 9-star great emperor who stood at the peak of martial arts. But Qin Hao was an exception. The huge battlefield a few months ago could not cover his original brilliance. His indomitable figure was imprinted in the hearts of every citizen in the city. Crash! Qin Hao and Xiaowa arrived and landed directly on the roof of the Gentleman Lookout Tower, their feet stepping on the edge of the eaves. At this moment, Qin Hao's deep eyes looked down at Mo Xian, who was sitting on the top floor of the Phoenix Fragrance Court. Although the top floor of the Phoenix Fragrance Court was high, it was still not higher than Qin Hao, who was standing on the eaves of the Gentleman Lookout Tower. What's going on? Xiang Mo heard the movement of the roof tiles and immediately stood up. He was receiving Zhou Wudao when someone flew over and stepped on their heads. In Feng City, who would be so audacious? Zhou Wudao's heart trembled. In fact, the moment Qin Hao's feet stepped on the roof, he already knew who the person on top of his head was. He would never mistake Qin Hao's aura. It would be impossible for him to mistake it in his life. But at this time, Zhou Wudao was not angry. His sharp and threatening eyes suddenly became a little confused. After a while, he sighed helplessly. What was to come had come. He had just entered Feng City and had not finished a pot of wine. Qin Hao had come here and deliberately stepped on the roof where he was. Was he here to humiliate him? Let's go up and have a look. Zhou Wudao said. If Qin Hao really came to humiliate him, he would not be able to avoid it no matter what. A loss was a loss. He would never be able to get rid of the shame of the martial emperor's escape in this life. Zhou Wudao walked slowly up the stairs to the roof. Every step he took was heavy, as if he was running away from something. His body was filled with a sense of frustration. Xiang Mo was stunned. He looked at Zhou Wudao and wondered what was going on. Suddenly, this evil prince from the East Continent seemed to have been hit by something. It was as if he had changed into a different person. From a suffocating posture, he suddenly became despondent. Xiang Mo hurried to catch up. He also wanted to see who the guy on the roof was. At this moment, Qin Hao arrived at the roof of Junwang Tower. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked at Mo Xian. He was not in a hurry to make a move. At this time, 2 auras came from behind and walked to where Qin Hao was standing. Qin Hao and Xiaowa looked at them subconsciously. They were both stunned. Xiang Mo and Zhou Wudao. Qin Hao did not show any reaction to Xiang Mo. However, he was slightly surprised by Zhou Wudao's appearance. However, he did not show too much of surprise. After all, in the southern region, there were many people from the East Continent. There might even be some old faces from the North border. These people were the signs of coming to the Divine Palace. From the beginning, Qin Hao thought that he might run into his old rival. The moment he saw Zhou Wudao, it happened to confirm his expectations. Mo Xian. Qin Hao's voice rumbled out. He was not here to make trouble for Zhou Wudao. There was no grudge between him and Zhou Wudao. The fight in the Martial Emperor tournament was just for Xiao Han. As for killing Zhou Wuning, it was because he deserved to die. When this shout spread out, the first person to be stunned was actually Zhou Wudao. He had thought that Qin Hao might know that he had come to Feng City and wanted to humiliate him. But from the sound of it, it was obvious that he was looking for Mo Xian. Interesting. Zhou Wudao could not help but feel much more relaxed. With a smile in his eyes, he crossed his arms and stared at the Phoenix Fragrance brothel. Could it be that Mo Xian had offended Qin Hao? He felt that there was a big show to watch. If Mo Xian had really provoked Qin Hao, this white-haired man was not easy to deal with. Mo Xian would most likely be in trouble. Zhu Tian, Divine Emperor. Chapter 1334. If Qin Hao didn't mention that battle, Zhou Wudao naturally wouldn't ask for a snub and expose the scandal of the Emperor Martial Tournament. Otherwise, he would be the one to be embarrassed. However, Qin Hao's target this time was actually Mo Xian. This was really thought-provoking. Why are you guys here? Xiang Mo was stunned. Speaking of Qin Hao is here. Ghost. It's none of your business. Stand aside. Siowa glanced at Xiang Mo and didn't care about his feelings anymore. At that moment, the voice spread out and the two words Mo, Xian, echoed in the air, attracting the attention of countless people. Although the people in the city didn't know what was going on, they could tell that Qin Hao had come for Mo Xian. Your Highness. Zhong and floated in and got down on one knee. What's the matter? Mo Xian's face was calm as his fingers continued to pluck at the guqin. Even though there was an unknown young man standing on the rooftop opposite him, the young man still called him by his name. On the other hand, he was completely unperturbed. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Zhong cowed out and briefly explained what had happened. 7 of my subordinates are dead, but this person is still unwilling to let the matter rest. A level 6 Yuan Venerate killed 6 people with 6 fingers and killed Lian Kong with 1 punch. Interesting. Mo Xian smiled and continued to pluck at the guqin. He wasn't angry at all. He sent a voice transmission downstairs. Did you hear that? Downstairs, there were many martialists from the demonic Luo nation. These martialists had different strengths, but even the weakest was a venerate. Among them, there were a few elders with particularly powerful auras. Apart from them, there were 2 people who stood out. They looked like commanders. There was a man and a woman. The woman was very beautiful and was called Lu Bingyan. The man was unusually muscular and was shirtless. He was called Gu Kuei. Like Zhong An's, they were also Mo Xian's trusted subordinates. The 3 of them were known as the 3 demon generals and were top-notch servants recruited by the royal family. They were extremely talented and possessed source souls. After hearing Zhong An's report that his team had been wiped out by the white-haired martialist, all the martialists from the demonic Luo nation glared at him with hatred. Dan Huang, this chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Without his orders, no one dared to act on their own. Zhong An's, your subordinates have all been annihilated. Are they a bunch of good-for-nothings? Isn't that too disappointing, Your Highness? Gu Kuei said mockingly. Zhong An's ignored him. He thought that Gu Kuei had never seen Qin Hao make a move. Otherwise, Gu Kuei's men wouldn't be that strong. Kid, you're not bad. Big sister likes smart people like you. Here, His Highness bestowed this to you. From today onwards, you'll be the high-level death servant of Mara Palace. Are you interested in joining Big Sister? Lu Bingyan said seductively. She walked to the window and looked at Qin Hao. Then, she took out a token and threw it to him. Zhong An's team was completely annihilated, but Prince Mo Xian did not immediately give the order to capture them. Obviously, he wanted to recruit Qin Hao for his own use. Since the 3 demon generals were Mo Xian's trusted subordinates, how could they not understand the prince's intention? Lu Bingyan's duty was to take care of the Mara Palace's death servant token. When the token was thrown over, it meant that Qin Hao would be Mo Xian's subordinate in the future. Otherwise, why did Qin Hao come over? He killed Prince Mo Xian's men, but he didn't run away immediately. Instead, he came over. This action was naturally to show off his strength and prove his value. Then, he would be able to get a job in front of Prince Mo Xian. Seeing this, Zhong An sneered in his heart. This time, Lu Bingyan was too smart for her own good. Whoosh! The token flew over. Qin Hao caught it and glanced at it. Reward the token? From today onwards, he would join Mo Xian's team of death servants? How ridiculous! Pung! Qin Hao grasped the token lightly, and it turned to dust. Then, he slowly loosened his grip, and the dust was blown away by the wind. Both Lu Bingyan and Gu Kuei were slightly surprised by this. They had just heard Zhong An say that the white-haired martialist had killed Lian Kong with a single punch. Lian Kong was that divine elephant martialist. However, the 2 of them had not seen it with their own eyes. Perhaps Zhong An's was exaggerating. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. However, seeing Qin Hao easily crush the token of the Mara Palace's death servant into dust made the 2 of them believe him. This token was made of a special metal that could withstand the attack of a ruler. It wasn't something that an ordinary Yuan Venerate could damage, let alone crush with a single palm. What do you mean? Lu Bingyan asked as she stopped smiling. She had also come to her senses after grasping the token. The white-haired martialist might not be here for a job. Are you not satisfied with my arrangements? Emocien also spoke up. However, the sound of his zither didn't stop. He didn't even look at Qin Hao as he continued. Give him a top-notch death servant token. Not everyone had the ability to obtain a top-notch death servant token. At the very least, the divine elephant martialist Lian Kong had worked hard for 5 or 6 years and still hadn't obtained Mo Xian's approval. Now, he was actually going to give it to Qin Hao. Yes, your highness. Lu Bingyin took out another token. This time, the token was purple gold in color and its edges were inlaid with diamonds. She threw it at Qin Hao again. In the Mara Palace, the status of a top-notch death servant far exceeded that of a high-ranking death servant or a low-ranking death servant. Furthermore, the treatment of the two couldn't be compared. However, even if Qin Hao was promoted to a top-notch death servant and was on par with the 3 demon generals, in terms of status, he still couldn't compare with the 3 demon generals. After all, the 3 of them grew up with Mo Xian and worked hard for Mo Xian since childhood. No one could replace them. Even so, Qin Hao was enough to arouse the envy of a large number of Mara martialists. Pung! Unexpectedly, this time, without waiting for the token to fly over, a sharp ray of light shot out, and Qin Hao shattered it into pieces with a single blow. This scene stunned everyone once again. Boy, what are you trying to do? Lu Bingyin said with some anger. A top-notch death servant was still not satisfied. Did he want to be a consecration of Mara Palace? His ambition wasn't small. I have long heard that the Prince of Mara Palace has unparalleled talent. I, Qin Hao of Western Liang, am here to seek your guidance. Qin Hao ignored her and stood tall and straight, looking down at Emocien, seeking a battle with the Prince of Mara. In a chapter. Chapter 1335. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio. You win if you get within 5 meters. It had always been the nature of the people of Morua to look down on others. Without Qin Hao's permission, they stepped into the bamboo grove. Without Qin Hao's permission, they wanted to take it for themselves and told Qin how to scram. Especially when they attacked the seriously ill Xiao Han. It was unforgivable. Qin Hao hadn't even asked for an explanation, but Emocien had already assumed that Qin Hao was here to show off his strength and seek refuge with Morua. How arrogant was he? Fine, Qin Hao wanted to see what kind of confidence and ability Emocien had to make him seek refuge with Morua. When his confidence was shattered, would the Prince of Morua still have the face to stay in Feng City? Before the sign of the Divine Palace opened, Qin Hao would teach him a lesson. So he asked for a fight. At this moment, the noisy street became extremely quiet, including Zhong, Ans, Lu Bingyin, and Gu Kuei. They didn't expect that Qin Hao would dare to challenge Prince Emocien. This person had killed Lian Kong and only had the Shattered Devil Luo country's martial practitioner token. Zhong Ans didn't dare to say that he could defeat Qin Hao, but that didn't mean that he was afraid of him. Thinking about it from another perspective, the white-haired warrior should be the same. If he didn't even have the confidence to defeat the 3 demon generals, who gave him the confidence and courage to challenge Prince Emocien. His words of challenge caused the common people on the street to fall silent. When they thought back to the Lord of the Pill Pavilion and the great deeds he had accomplished in the Southern Domain, as well as the strength he had displayed in the Battle of Feng City a few months ago, there was no need to mention how outstanding Qin Hao was. But in Phoenix Fragrance House sat the Prince of Morua. The warriors of the East Continent were powerful, and their ideas were deeply rooted in the 4 regions of the continent. Could Qin Hao win? Many people were worried that something bad would happen to Qin Hao. He was the hero of Feng City, the savior of the people. Once he was defeated, how could the people of Mo Luo let him go so easily? However, there were also many people who had confidence in Qin Hao. In Golden Light City, Chang Halo and the other 2 had joined forces, but they still couldn't do anything. Could Emocien be stronger than Chang Halo and the other 2 combined? In particular, the playboy in the city had long been unhappy with Emocien. He had become the center of attention as soon as he arrived in Feng City, and yet he still sat elegantly upstairs. At this moment, They were also hoping that Qin Hao would destroy Mo Xian's prestige and let the people of the East Continent know the power of the Southern region martial artists. After all, Qin Hao had been in the Southern region for almost a year. In the eyes of the aristocratic families, he was one of them. Ha ha! A thunderous laugh rang out. Zhou Wudao's reaction was completely different from the reaction of the three dark generals and the people. He had completely confirmed that Mo Xian had provoked Qin Hao. Moreover, he had forced Qin Hao to come and challenge him directly. It seemed that he had provoked a lot. However, Zhou Wudao's laughter at this time was particularly harsh, as if mocking Mo Xian. It was too degrading for anyone to challenge him. Of course, that was not Zhou Wudao's intention. However, when it fell into the ears of the people of Mo Luo, it was different. Boy, why don't you take a piss and look at your own face? How dare you challenge my prince? Gu Kuei was the first to rush out. His sturdy body was like a bear. He ran all the way, smashing many tables and chairs in Phoenix Fragrance Court. He was like a huge monster leaping from the second floor to the top floor of the opposite gentleman's tower. At this time, he punched out. The moment he punched, a strong light burst out from his back. His thick arm suddenly swelled up like the long arm of a giant ape. It was strange and terrifying. Xiaogua's body fell directly. Seeing Gu Kuei's muscular body and that he was also a strength-type warrior, his fighting spirit was aroused. The two of them, one rushing down and the other rushing up, were extremely fast. Their figures were getting closer and closer. At the moment of contact, a green light burst out from Xiaogua's back, followed by the roar of a giant bull. He also punched out. When he punched out, the muscles on his arm suddenly swelled and blue veins protruded. Bang! The two fists collided in midair, and there was a heavy sound of flesh hitting flesh. There was no aftershock, nor was there any gorgeous light. They were both using pure strength to resist, with the help of the source spirit. At this moment, Xiaogua's flying body suddenly flew back. His feet stepped on the eaves, and he slid back 3 meters, crushing a large amount of debris under his feet. Then, his face turned red and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Xiaogua smiled ferociously. He wiped the blood with the back of his hand and stood beside Qin Hao again. Gu Kuei, on the other hand, was hit in the head and fell to the street. Although his cultivation level was higher than Xiaogua's, he had missed a step and rushed up. Xiaogua was descending from the sky and using the momentum to press down on him, which was very disadvantageous for Gu Kuei. Under the impact of Xiaogua's bull soul's brute force, he fell to the street with a bang, creating a large hole in the ground. However, he did not suffer any injuries. It was just that his appearance was very embarrassing. What great strength! Gu Kuei was shocked. Although he wasn't injured, he was still shocked. Who would have thought that an 18 or 19-year-old boy beside the white-haired warrior would have such great strength? With one punch, Gu Kuei's arrogance was suppressed. Xiaogua's attack shocked the people in the city and the people of Mo Luo. Not only did the white-haired martial artist possess such tyrannical strength, but even the young boy beside him also possessed such tyrannical strength. He is almost 3 layers taller than you, Qin Hao said. Those who didn't understand this move would think that Xiaogua had lost face. However, Qin Hao knew that Xiaogua had actually been injured. It's not serious. How could a small fry like him deserve Big Brother's attention? Xiaogua said nonchalantly. If he became a peak Yuan venerate, Gu Kuei would definitely not be his match. Mo Xian, get out here! Qin Hao shouted, his temper exploding. He couldn't let his brother suffer for nothing. Mo Xian was still playing the zither, as if the scolding wasn't directed at him. He didn't even glance at Qin Hao as he said, "Brother Qingqi, is this how the great Zheng treats its guests?" He had just entered the Zheng nation and someone had scolded him to get out here. Wasn't it impolite for the Zheng nation to ignore it? Zheng Qingqi, who had caught up, happened to be floating in the air. He chuckled. How would I dare? It was just a spar. I also wanted to see your techniques. Impolite? Was Mo Xian even qualified to talk about impolite? Zheng Qingqi had welcomed the Mo Luo nation's team as they entered the Eagle Head harbor. Along the way, Mo Xian had sent Zhong Ans to interact with Zheng Qingqi. In terms of status, who wasn't a prince? How could he have a nerve to jump out and say that the Zheng nation was impolite? Zheng, the music stopped abruptly. Mo Xian finally raised his head. Under his black hair, his eyes were deep and sharp. He looked at Zheng Qingqi and asked, "What if he dies?" "It has nothing to do with the Zheng nation," Zheng Qingqi replied. "All right." Mo Xian nodded. His gaze shifted to the top floor of the Gentleman Lookout Tower and landed on Qin Hao. "If you have the ability to get within 5 meters of me, I will apologize to you in front of everyone." Clang! As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of the zither rang out once more. The elegant melody instantly transformed into a majestic melody. It was like a majestic army that was about to go on an expedition. Its aura could swallow mountains and rivers as it surged towards the Monarch lookout pavilion. Divine Emperor Jiutian. Chapter 1336. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio 1 meter, left the Tianshui Street between the Huangxiang Garden and the Junwang Pavilion was 10 meters wide. According to Mo Xian, if Qin Hao could stand in the middle of the street and not die, then he would win. Mo Xian would apologize in front of everyone. The majestic sound of the guqin caused all cultivators to feel their blood boil. It was as if their blood was being stirred by the sound of the guqin. Although the commoners couldn't feel the power of the music, the majestic sound of the music frightened them. The crowd quickly moved to the two ends of the street. Between the two restaurants, there was a large empty space. Mo Xian has twin life spirits and is in the first level of the martial emperor's stage. His first soul is the guqin spirit. Zhou Wudao stood calmly and secretly communicated with Qin Hao. A year had passed since the kingdom tournament. Today, he wanted to take the opportunity to see how much his opponent had improved. If he was weak, he might be able to redeem himself. Qin Hao didn't reply to Zhou Wudao. The great Zhou Empire and the kingdom of Mo Luo were mortal enemies. That guy didn't remind him out of kindness. At this moment, Qin Hao stood on the edge of the roof and quietly felt the guqin music. When the guqin music entered his ears, it was like a huge army that wanted to kill him and bury him. Qin Hao didn't really understand music. He only knew that musicians mainly used spiritual attacks. Qin Hao's soul was strong enough. No matter what kind of attack it was, as long as it was within the range of his spiritual endurance, it wouldn't be of much use. Unless the Zither Emperor Jiuxing made a move, Qin Hao's foundation could be shaken. However, after fighting with Changhe Lo several times, Qin Hao also learned something. Besides attacking a cultivator's mind, the power of the music itself couldn't be underestimated. For example, Changhe Road's guqin music transformed into an ancient god. Its attack was very strong. At this moment, Zhou Wudao reminded him that Mo Xian was in the first level of the martial emperor's stage. This was much stronger than Changhe Lo. After all, his opponent had entered the martial emperor's stage. Therefore, he couldn't let his guard down in this battle. Qin Hao gathered his thoughts and took the first step. At this time, the sound of the zither music became stronger and more ferocious. It was as if an army of heavy infantry was crushing towards the lone Qin Hao. Qin Hao raised his hand and waved it. A jade-green light appeared in front of him. At this moment, a loud and clear sound of a sword rang out in the void, purifying people's hearts. The great void sword had been carefully repaired for a long time, and it had merged with the Ling Tian Jade. The power of the divine weapon had been greatly improved. During the debate in Golden Light City and the battle in Feng City, Qin Hao did not even have the chance to draw his sword. Today, he would test his sword on Mo Xian. Wang. Qin Hao took a second step. With his sword in front of him, the sound of the sword reverberated around him. One man and one sword was like a single entity. He charged into the army alone. The infantry army formed by Mo Xian's guqin did not dare to advance. When it got close, the guqin music was absorbed by the great void sword. From the image, The vibrating sound waves in the air all bypassed Qin Hao. It was as if he was besieged by tens of thousands of soldiers, and no one dared to touch him. It was extremely strange. At this time, Qin Hao took 2 steps and had already walked 1 meter. Mo Xian frowned. The white-haired warrior was not affected by the sound of the zither. Good, Mo Xian said. The strength of his fingers increased. Suddenly, the sound of the music became more powerful. Faintly, the warriors seemed to hear the sound of horses' hooves from the music. They seemed to see tens of thousands of soldiers and horses in the void. The momentum was amazing. Tens of thousands of horses rushed towards Qin Hao, wanting to trample him into meat paste. Naive, Qin Hao sneered and took a 3rd step. His entire body exuded a powerful aura as he ignored the charge of the war horses and headed straight for Mo Xian. The distance of this 3rd step was very large. It was another meter. He is still not affected? Mo Xian's expression finally changed. He lowered his head to play the zither, but his mind could see Qin Hao's every move. He found that his music was firmly blocked by the sword in front of Qin Hao. To be precise, the sword absorbed the music he played and melted the power of the music into nothing. This sword was very strange. Let me give you a kind advice. Show some real skills. He is not as weak as you think. Otherwise, you will be slapped in the face later. Zhou Wudao shouted with a smile. Noisy. Mo Xian looked up and stared at Zhou Wudao. He could not help but put more strength in his fingers. The sound of the zither entered the ears. The sound of horses' hooves disappeared and was replaced by the roar of chariots' wheels. Many warriors saw that there seemed to be golden chariots gathering in the void one after another and arranged in a formation. These chariots constantly transformed from Mo Xian's guqin and rushed towards Qin Hao crazily. There was definitely something strange about that sword. Mo Xian thought that it was not that his music did not work on Qin Hao, but that the sword blocked it. This sword was a good treasure. After all, the treasure had a limit. No matter how strong his music was, he did not believe that this sword could not be destroyed. The chariots rumbled in the void. This time, not only did the warriors see the shape of the chariots, but also the ordinary people saw it clearly. Obviously, Mo Xian was stimulated by Zhou Wudao and became serious. Furthermore, each chariot was filled with powerful warriors, all of them wielding spears. When they got close to Qin Hao, they would stab out with their spears. He didn't believe that a single sword would be able to block all of them. Qin Hao also moved. Just now, he did block the music with the Great Void Sword because he wanted to see if Ling Tianyu had the ability to accommodate the sound of heaven and earth. Obviously, when a cultivator played the guqin, he also needed to use primordial qi, and primordial qi was exactly what Ling Tianyu absorbed. Buzz. Qin Hao took the 4th step, another meter. For steps, a total of 3 meters. Trapped in the powerful sound waves and surrounded by the war chariots, Qin Hao's attacks, which were like raging waves, could not shake him at all, nor could they stop him from moving forward. He seemed to have become a young emperor again, exuding the spirit of submission. But the sword in his hand was no longer formed by qi. It was a real sword and an upgraded divine artifact. No matter how powerful your attacks are, I only have one sword. Boom! The sharp sword qi slashed out. Not only did this sword strike overturn all the war chariots in the void, but the sword qi was like a white wave of qi. Its sound disrupted the music of the guqin, and it even slashed towards Mo Xian, who was playing the guqin. Your Highness! Your Highness! Your Highness! The warriors of the Moro kingdom were all shocked. This white-haired warrior seemed to be a bit strong. Humph! Mo Xian pulled the strings with one hand, and with a squeak, he pulled the guqin half a meter away. When the sword light slashed, he released his fingers, and the strings bounced back like light, hitting the guqin and shaking out a strong sound wave. The sound wave turned into the shape of a half moon, sweeping out and colliding with the white sword qi. Crash! On the top floor of the Phoenix Fragrance Tower, the entire roof was blown away and shattered in the air. But this sword was also neutralized by Mo Xian. So powerful. The Prince of the Moro Kingdom is indeed powerful. Pavilion Master Qin didn't lose. Not only did he not lose, but he also slashed at him. Look, Pavilion Master Qin has taken the 5th step. There was a lot of discussion outside. Between the sword and the string, Qin Hao took another step. When the 5th step landed, he crossed 4 meters. Unknowingly, he was only 1 meter away from the agreement. Jiu Qian Divine Emperor. Chapter 1337. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translation start. Over the people of Feng City were shocked. They seemed to see hope for victory. The high and mighty East Continent people were not invincible. The martial artists of Moroa were not calm. At this moment, they realized that Qin Hao was not ordinary. He was a little strong. No wonder Zhong and's team was wiped out. The white-haired martial artist was still disdainful of Lord Gu Kuei. Others might not know how powerful Prince Mo Xian's Gu Qin skills were, but his subordinates knew. After all, when Mo Xian was bored, he would often ask his subordinates to practice with him. When they faced Mo Xian's Gu Qin music personally, they understood what it meant to be terrifying. The divine elephant martial artist, Lin Kong, had not been able to get closer than 5 meters. His record was 4 meters. If not, he would have become a top-level death servant. And Qin Hao was only 1 step away. And Qin Hao had killed Lin Kong. At this moment, Liu Bingyin, who was watching the battle, was very nervous. She was worried that the white-haired martial artist would break Lin Kang's record with 1 more step. Although he could get closer than 5 meters to Mo Xian with the Gu Qin music, it did not prove anything. How could the white-haired martial artist beat Mo Xian's opponent at 5 meters? But in this way, the prince would have to apologize in public. Mo Xian's life would be stained. It would be a humiliation for Moroa. On the roof of the Sovereign Tower, Zhou Wudao watched everything. Qin Hao only needed to take 1 more step to humiliate Mo Xian. However, Zhou Wudao was not happy at all. On the contrary, he felt pressure. He thought that after a year, when he met Qin Hao again, he would be able to wash away the shame of the Emperor Martial competition and save face. But the facts proved that Qin Hao had not weakened. Of course, Mo Xian had underestimated his opponent. After all, Mo Xian did not want to apologize in front of everyone. He was an extremely prideful person. But Zhou Wudao was not a fool. When the two of them exchanged blows, neither of them used their source spirits. They relied on their own cultivation to compete with each other. This was enough to prove that Qin Hao had the capital to confront Mo Xian head-on. Yet Zhou Wudao still had the mood to be happy. In midair, Qin Hao lifted his foot again. With this step, everything will be settled. It ends here. Mo Xian waved his hand and slammed it down on the Gu Qin. The surging power shook the Gu Qin, and he took the opportunity to stand up. His right hand turned into an eagle's claw, and his sharp eyes stared at Qin Hao's raised leg. His 5 fingers grabbed the strings of the Gu Qin, and as if he was peeling off his bones, he pulled out the 5 strings and released them. Wong. The sound of a zither of the great Tao reverberated out like the ringing of a great bell. It carried the momentum of a surging river as it surged forward. As the sound of the zither swept over, Qin Hao felt that he was in a raging storm. His black hair danced wildly, and he felt the pain of being cut by a knife on his face. However, the power of the zither was not enough to cause harm to his demigod body, let alone shake his powerful sovereign spirit. Wave-breaking style, open for me, Qin Hao shouted in a low voice. He operated the art of endless samsara and slashed down with his sword. The sword light soared into the sky and cut the raging sound waves. The sword seemed to have split the river and torn the mountains. It cut the storm apart. The sound of the sound waves reverberated in the air. The sound of the great law collapsed in front of everyone. When the sword light dissipated, there was no more sound of Gu Qin in Feng City. Qin Hao's body stopped in the middle of Tianshui Street, standing in midair, looking down at Mo Xian. 5 meters, the dust settled. It's done. 5 meters. Pavilion Master Qin is amazing. The people were stunned. The legend of the invincible people of the East Continent had been broken. This Lu Bingyin, Zhong An's, and Gu Kuei were stunned, and their faces were full of disbelief. Wu Mi, are you very confident in yourself? Qin Hao stared at Mo Xian and said indifferently. Under everyone's confused gazes, he once again retreated step by step, returning to his original position and stepping onto the roof of the gentleman's pavilion. Continue. Continue. One more time. He did not want Mo Xian to apologize. He had to do it again. Tianshui Street was silent. Zhou Wudao's mouth twitched. He was really an arrogant bastard. He did not take Mo Xian seriously at all. You will regret your stupid actions for the rest of your life. Mo Xian's sharp gaze became abnormally gloomy. For the first time, he felt a turbid air choking his chest. It was so stifling that it made him feel uncomfortable. Ever since he was born as a prince, he had never been treated like this before. He was careless. He underestimated his opponent. He seriously underestimated his opponent's ability. It was not until the Guqin music of the Great Tao was broken that he realized that Qin Hao was not just relying on a sword. He could also resist his Guqin music. But if he had to do it again, would the white-haired martial artist have a chance? Mo Xian sat down quietly, took 2 deep breaths, and adjusted his state. His 10 fingers fell on the Guqin again. But this time, he did not look at the Guqin. His eyes were fixed on Qin Hao. Buzz! He waved one hand, and an extremely powerful primordial qi drove the Guqin music. A giant blade flew out from the Guqin, as if it was cutting through space, and fell on Qin Hao's head. Chicken strangle. Qin Hao ignored the giant blade above his head and took a step forward. A powerful purple flame aura surged around his body as if it was burning. Clang! The flame above his head exploded, and the giant blade was shattered by the flame aura. Qin Hao was unscathed, but with this step, he had crossed 2 meters. Protective upstanding qi. Zhou Wudao's face tightened. What a strong primordial qi, even stronger than in the Imperial Martial Art competition. This strength did not refer to the increase in realm, but the density of primordial qi itself. However, in the second round of battle, both Qin Hao and Mo Xian began to show their unique skills. This was even more exciting than the first round. Sound like a mountain, qi like a mountain, sound of the great Tao. Mo Xian watched as Qin Hao took the first step. This first step actually crossed 2 meters. Was he trying to show off? Mo Xian's 10 fingers strummed the strings, and his qi penetrated the Guqin. His spirit and willpower seemed to have merged into the Guqin music, turning into a majestic divine mountain. The divine mountain fell from the sky, mercilessly crushing down. Rainbow dragon breaks the sun. Qin Hao's long hair fluttered. He closed his eyes and merged the crepe myrtle sword into the 3-foot-long blade. When the divine mountain pressed down, the second move of the heaven-class sword technique burst out. He raised the sword with one hand, and the great void sword spewed out a blazing sword aura. At this moment, the sword qi soared into the sky, and a roaring dragon rushed out to meet the falling divine mountain. The divine mountain was penetrated by the dragon. Boom! The sky seemed to be collapsing. When the sound was heard, everyone's eardrums buzzed, and they felt as if their brains were being torn apart. Too strong. The 3 demon generals, Zhong, An's, Gu Kuei, and Lu Bingyin, turned pale. Prince Mo Xian's sound of the great Tao was enough to kill an ordinary first-level monarch. Furthermore, it was at the peak of the first-level monarch. It had actually been annihilated by the white-haired martialist sword. This person was only a 6th-level Yuan Venerate. Was he a monster? However, after this strike, Qin Hao took the second step and crossed another 2 meters. He was only 1 step away from the agreed-upon location. Buzz! Mo Xian was furious. Light blossomed behind him. An illusory Guqin spirit appeared. In an instant, his aura soared. Although he was still at the 1st-level Monarch realm, his aura had already risen to the 3rd-level Monarch realm. His body was surging with intense golden flames. Finally, you can't help but use your source soul. Zhou Wudao sneered. However, he didn't look at the demon. Instead, he stared at Qin Hao. He knew very well that in the next second, a raging fire would descend from Qin Hao's body. The color of the fire would be the color of blood. Education 123 Literature Network. Chapter 1338. Walk over Mo. Cien unleashed his Guqin spirit. His aura soared to the level of a third-level Emperor Realm cultivator. He wouldn't allow Qin Hao to take another step forward. His fingers moved faster and faster as he played. At the same time, the Guqin spirit behind him began to play on its own. Its rhythm was the same as his own, as if two Guqin tunes had merged into one, resonating with each other. The Guqin music from the Phoenix Fragrance Court was abnormally terrifying. It was as rapid as a storm, as if a hurricane had been set off in the city. Qin Hao couldn't help but feel an enormous pressure. Caught in the violent Guqin music, he couldn't take a step forward. His body felt incomparably heavy, as if it had been imprisoned. He was clear that he had reached his limit. His current state was that of an ordinary martial practitioner. At the very most, his cultivation method was slightly more advanced. Even if he had the indestructible samsara art, he would not be able to resist Mo Cien, who had activated his soul power. Boom! Just as Zhou Wudao had expected, an incomparably fierce flame ignited in the air. It was as red as blood. The flame completely enveloped Qin Hao, and his aura soared. Qin Hao activated the red lotus tyrannical fire, and the pressure around him plummeted. Endless power seemed to flow through his body. Dong! His foot stomped down unstoppably against the Guqin music. It was as if he'd stomped on everyone's hearts. Everyone's eyes widened. The scene fell into a deathly silence. Everyone looked up at the figure in the middle of the street. Not only had Qin Hao returned to his original position, but he'd also scattered the dazzling Guqin music. He'd done it again. The citizens of Feng City below were incomparably shocked. Qin Hao defeated the prince of Mo Luo twice. Liu Bingyin, Zhong An's, and Gu Kuei were incomparably uncomfortable. If the prince had been careless the first time and underestimated his opponent, what about the second time? Zhou Wudao smiled coldly and did not show any surprised expression. It was just that the gaze he used to stare at Qin Hao became even sharper. Enough! From within the Phoenix Fragrance Garden, an aged voice was heard. The voice was spoken faintly, but it reverberated between heaven and earth, giving people a strong sense of deterrence. Qin Hao's heart trembled. When the old voice entered his ears, he knew that the other party was an extremely terrifying character. He was the weakest of the low-level thearchs, but there was no fear on his face. That's enough. If you say so, then so be it. Qin Hao didn't pay him any attention. He retreated back to the edge of the Gentleman Gazing Tower's eaves and said, Continue. Continue a third time. Mo Cien was the prince of the East Continent. What did Qin Hao think of him as? Did he think of him as a monkey? Time after time, there was no end to it. If he were an ordinary person, he probably wouldn't have been able to withstand such humiliation. Zhang Qingqi smiled and shook his head. This was really Qin Hao's style. 2 slaps in the face were not enough, and he was going to do it a third time. The corner of Zhou Wudao's eyes twitched. He and Mo Cien had been fighting since they were young in the East Continent. Both sides had suffered losses and also lost battles. However, it was the first time that Mo Cien had been humiliated by Qin Hao. At this moment, Zhou Wudao secretly rejoiced. He felt that running away from the imperial martial competition was the right thing to do. How dare you? Gu Kuei roared like a lion that had been slashed by a knife. His burly body flew into the air, and he directly absorbed his soul into his body. He entered his beast form. From his appearance, he looked a bit like an iron rhinoceros. His huge fist blasted through the void, getting closer and closer to Qin Hao. He would never allow his prince to be humiliated by this person again and again. Clang! A majestic sound of a Guqin exploded. Before Gu Kuei could get close, the sound of the Guqin was incomparably heavy. It was as if a giant palm had descended from the sky and slammed Gu Kuei into the ground. Your Highness, why? Gu Kuei spat out a mouthful of blood as he cried out in a hoarse voice. Even though he was one of the 3 demon generals, he still couldn't take a single note from Mo Xian, even after activating his origin soul. One could only imagine how strong Qin Hao was. Scram, Mo Xian said coldly. His eyes were as cold as ice as he stared at Qin Hao. He sat down again, pulled the strings, and waved his 10 fingers forward. Wong, Wong. The Guqin spirit behind him sounded at the same time, and 2 sounds of music blasted out. At this moment, the entire Huangxiang shook violently under the sound of the Guqin. The tables and chairs in the restaurant shattered at the same time. That's more like it, Qin Hao said as he slashed out. The emerald sword in his hand released a red flame that burned the sky. The sound of the Guqin was shattered, and he took another step forward, crossing 3 meters. Humph! Mo Xian raised his arm and waved it down. The Guqin spirit behind him turned into a ray of light and entered the Guqin under him, fusing with the soul weapon. At this moment, Mo Xian's temperament changed significantly. He was like an emperor, exuding the aura of a ruler. Although his aura did not increase after fusing with the soul weapon, the power of his Guqin had more than doubled. His palms moved, and the sound of the great Tao reverberated. The rhythm continued to gather, accumulating power. A bright moon formed in the sky, emitting endless cold intent. Even the sun in the sky seemed to be robbed of its light and warmth. When the bright light scattered, a terrifying cold current rolled up in the huge Feng city. One could see with the naked eye that the houses were covered in bright frost. The southern region is like spring all year round. Don't cause trouble for others, Qin Hao scolded. Immediately after, his body was covered in flames. The bright red flames dyed half of Feng City red. The flames gathered around his body and formed a huge fireball above his head. It was as if he had created a second sun. Inside the fireball, there was the sound of a dragon roaring, exuding a terrifying dragon chi. Go! Qin Hao pulled out his sword and slapped the fireball. The fireball flew out like a comet, colliding with the bright moon. The sun and the moon competed for brilliance, the collision of ice and fire, the impact of the Yuan spirits. Boom! With a thunderous boom, the bright moon shattered, and the fireball exploded. A fire dragon coiled out, savagely tearing at the zither playing Mo Xian. Break! Mo Xian roared. His 10 fingers moved quickly, dazzling the eyes. Countless starlight flew out from his palms and collided with the fire dragon. In the end, the fire dragon disintegrated. However, at this moment, Qin Hao stood in the middle of the street again. This was the 3rd time that he had returned to the position that had humiliated Mo Xian. But this time, Qin Hao did not go back. Not only did he not go back, but he directly crossed 5 meters and continued to advance towards Mo Xian. This despicable guy. Lu Bingyin gnashed her teeth in anger, but she did not dare to make a move. If she did, she would become Gu Kuei in the next second. Besides, even if she made a move, she could not do anything to Qin Hao. At this moment, even she, as one of the 3 demon generals, had to admit that Qin Hao was strong. The other party's strength had already surpassed hers and Gu Kuei's. He was qualified to challenge Mo Xian. Zhong En's laughed bitterly in his heart. He understood now. No wonder Qin Hao was so disdainful of him in the bamboo grove and killed his men in front of him. It was not to humiliate him, but because Qin Hao had never put him in his eyes. It was ridiculous that Zhong En's had thought that he was on par with Qin Hao. Big brother, you are indeed my idol, Sayo was said with a face full of admiration. He had slapped Mo Xian's face 3 times and crossed 5 meters for the 3rd time. If Qin Hao walked up to him, Mo Xian's face would be lost. He did not know if he would find a hole to hide in at that time, or if he would still have the face to stay in Feng City. Zhou Wudao did not say a word. He was a bystander, but at this time, he suddenly became more nervous than anyone else. He knew best what level Mo Xian was at. Although he was weaker than him by 1 level, they were actually on par with each other in a real fight. But this Qin Hao was simply a monster. He resisted the pressure of Mo Xian's Guqin spirit and wanted to stand together with him, but Mo Xian could not stop him. Thinking about it from another perspective, If he made a move now, would he be able to stop Qin Hao? Absolute kill of the ages. Mo Xian's black hair flew in the wind, and his eyes were faintly red. When Qin Hao took the second step, he crossed 3 meters, 6 meters. Not only had he reached the agreed position, but he had also crossed 1 meter. The main street of Feng City was 10 meters wide. Qin Hao was now only 4 meters away from Mo Xian. According to his opponent's thoughts, he would probably reach them in one more step, and this person obviously had no intention of stopping. Education 123 Literature Network. Chapter 1339. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, bowing his head in apology, his soul power surged wildly, and strands of golden light poured into the guqin in his hand. At this moment, a majestic emperor qi spread out from Mo Xian's body. Although he had not reached the emperor realm, the arrogance of the emperor family was branded in his bones, and he had the bloodline of the emperor family. As soon as the emperor qi was released, all the emperors present, even those who were one level higher than Mo Xian, started sweating. Under the pressure of the emperor qi, they couldn't help but feel the urge to kneel. An extremely intense light flew out from the guqin. In front of Mo Xian, countless musical notes condensed into an illusory human figure. This human figure seemed to be Mo Xian's incarnation. He wore golden battle armor and wielded a golden emperor sword. When Qin Hao took the third step, the incarnation slashed with his sword. It was unbelievably fast. The emperor's sword emitted endless golden light, as if it could destroy Feng City. Qin Hao snorted in his heart. Was Mo Xian qualified to use the emperor qi to suppress him? He was the descendant of an emperor. He had inherited Emperor Mo Luo's pride in his blood and bones. However, Qin Hao himself was an emperor, a 9-star emperor. Incomparably hot flames burned as Qin Hao faced the incoming phantom. Qin Hao fearlessly slashed down. Clang! The two swords clashed, and sparks appeared in the air as the two figures crossed each other. In the next moment, Mo Xian's incarnation burned in the air and turned into ashes. Qin Hao took another step and crossed another 3 meters. A total of 9 meters. He still didn't stop. He was already in front of Mo Xian. The great void sword in his hand was surrounded by blazing red lotus fire. He slashed down. Your Highness! Your Highness! Your Highness! Zhongans and all the Mo Luo cultivators were shocked. The great path has no sound. Mo Xian wasn't afraid of the sword at all. His hands plucked the strings even more crazily. It was as if there were hundreds of thousands of hands flashing back and forth on the guqin. He was shocked by Qin Hao's performance, but he didn't think he would lose. The strings of the guqin pulsed wildly under Mo Xian's palm. However, there was no sound coming from the guqin. Everyone could only see that Qin Hao's sword was descending at an extremely slow speed, as if it was being greatly hindered. It became slower and slower, and more powerless. Destroy! Qin Hao roared. The art of the indestructible samsara circulated wildly. The strength of his primordial qi rose steadily, like a vast ocean pushing the sword momentum. The sword light turned into a terrifying flame, as if it could burn everything. Mo Xian's great Tao was silent. The obstruction under the sword instantly disappeared. Bang! This sword slashed down unstoppably, shattering Mo Xian's guqin, tearing the floor, and splitting the entire Phoenix Garden into two. Puff! Mo Xian's face suddenly turned pale, and a large amount of blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. His guqin spirit had been shattered, and his ritual implement had been cut in half by the sword. There was no sound of guqin in Feng City. He had lost. I win if I get within 5 meters. Qin Hao asked, his chest heaving and his mouth gasping for breath. He used his sword to poke at the broken guqin under Mo Xian and continued. Come, continue playing. Mo Xian was silent. He had not even dared to look up. There was no emperor's qi in his body. His face was extremely pale, and there was blood under his mouth. He looked a little sad. Continue playing? How could he play? His ritual implement had been cut into pieces. At this time, when he heard Qin Hao say that he was within 5 meters, Mo Xian felt like a slap to his face, making him feel ashamed. He was born in an imperial family and had twin life spirits. He was a natural talent. How many geniuses like him were there in the East Continent? He did not care about the throne at all. This time, he came to the southern region to participate in the Divine Palace's omen. He was not appointed by his family. How could his family be willing to let such an outstanding person like him come and challenge the omen that was a dead end? All of this was just to vent his anger. He wanted to prove that he could do what others could not. Others had to die, but he wanted to survive the omen and become a great emperor powerhouse nurtured by the Divine Palace. He did not need any resources provided by his family. Furthermore, Zhou Wudao had come to participate in the Divine Palace's omen. How could he lose to him? He did not know why Zhou Wudao had come. People like Zhou Wudao were just like him. They had no mission to carry out, and they had to take on the Divine Palace's stagnant waters on behalf of their family. However, Mo Xian had still come. He could not let Zhou Wudao look down on him. The omen had not started yet. He had not had the time to shine in front of the geniuses of the 4 regions. Today, he had been slapped in the face by Yuan Venerate. Furthermore, the other party was only a level 6 Yuan Venerate. This was simply, Prince Zheng Qingqi. Is this how the Zheng family treats their guests? The old voice in Phoenix Fragrance House was heard again. What does this have to do with me? Zheng Qingqi was stunned. Nothing to do with you? All right. As soon as he finished speaking, 4 old men stepped from the 3rd floor of Phoenix Fragrance Garden to the top floor and stood behind Mo Xian. The leader of the group, an old man in gray, stared at Qin Hao with a gloomy expression. A faint platinum luster floated around his body as he said, "Young man, if you go too far, you will break. Do you have any objections to this?" Qin Hao looked up at the old man. Judging from the voice, the other party was the owner of the old voice. He was an Emperor Yuan powerhouse. The 3 old men behind him were also peak Emperor realm powerhouses who might have even comprehended Emperor intent. An Emperor Yuan and 3 peak Emperor realm powerhouses. This lineup could not be underestimated. These 4 people were probably the elders who had escorted Mo Xian to the southern region. However, how could this matter be dropped just like that? Haha, how could it be possible? You even want to threaten me if you go too far? Apologize, Qin Hao said coldly, ignoring the old man. Mo Xian raised his head and stood up abruptly. His gaze met with Qin Hao's, but he didn't say anything. Young man, didn't you hear the old man's words? The old man continued. At the same time, an invisible emperor intent emanated from him. May I ask who you are? Qin Hao looked at him. Old man Mo Qi, the 4th elder of the Mo Luo royal family. The old man raised his head and puffed out his chest. In other words, he was Mo Xian's 4th grandfather, the 4th uncle of the current Mo Luo emperor. Not everyone could stand in front of him and speak. Oh, Qin Hao dragged his voice. Apologize. You. Mo Qi's eyes widened in anger. Brother Qingqi, the sign of the Divine Palace is imminent. I entered the Zheng dynasty and was treated as a guest by you. Don't you need the warriors of the Mo Luo Palace to work together? Mo Xian ignored Qin Hao and turned to look at Zheng Qingqi. Although he had promised to apologize, how could he stand in front of the people of Feng City and bow his head to Qin Hao and apologize? I'm sorry, Brother Xian, but Brother Qin is also my honored guest. When the sign opens, he will travel with me. You were rude first. It's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. What's the harm in apologizing? Zheng Qingqi smiled. Prince Zheng, how can this person compare to His Highness? Have you weighed the consequences in your heart? Gu Dai roared. Please shut your dog mouth, Xiao shouted. What if I don't apologize? Mo Xian said coldly. An even more turbulent aura emanated, blowing his black hair behind his head. Then you can stay in the Phoenix Fragrance brothel forever, Qin Hao said. Ignorant brat. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Kneel down before this old man. Mo Qi couldn't bear it anymore. He raised his old hand, and a terrifying Emperor Realm flame condensed in his palm. Boom! An indomitable force suddenly descended from the sky. It crushed Mo-Chi's head like an invisible giant palm, smashing him from the top floor of the Phoenix Fragrance brothel to the ground. He smashed through 4 floors. Ignorant brat, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You don't have a problem with apologizing to this old woman, do you? An old woman in black quietly floated down from the sky and stood beside Qin Hao. Her extremely sharp eyes were like a terrifying demon bird as she stared at the 3 Emperor Realm Elders of Mo Luo, Divine Emperor of the 9 Heavens. Chapter 1340. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, get out of Feng City. The eyes of the 3 Emperor Realm old men widened, and they looked extremely nervous. The old lady's gaze made them feel suffocated. One had to know that Mo-Chi, a 5th-stage emperor, was actually beaten to the ground by a single palm. This old lady was so terrifying. Drip! Cold sweat dripped down Mo Xian's forehead. He looked at the hole under his feet in horror. Through the hole, he could see Mo-Chi lying at the bottom of the building. Why? Mo Xian couldn't understand. Zhong An's clearly said that the Zheng clan didn't have any emperor-level experts. The strongest forces in the southern region were Ning Wu, Nin Ao, and Bei Ao, as well as the 4 great sect. Therefore, after coming to Feng City, he had never treated the Zheng clan seriously. This old lady, who appeared out of nowhere, beat his 4th old ancestor to the ground. Who exactly was this old lady? Say, Senior, I'm Mo-Chi, an elder of the Mo Luo nation. I just arrived in the southern region, and I don't know how I offended you. Please forgive me. Mo-Chi, who was lying on the ground, moved twice and flew back while enduring the pain. When he opened his mouth, a broken tooth slipped out of his mouth. He lowered his posture and no longer dared to raise his head and chest. His heart trembled. The power that suppressed him just now was at the peak of the 8th stage Emperor realm. Just a little bit more, and she would enter the 9-star Great Emperor realm. As a middle-level Great Emperor, he could only struggle for a while at most. Even if he struggled, it would be useless. There were still terrifying existences in the southern region. Qin Hao laughed secretly. The people of Mo Luo nation bullied the weak and feared the strong. They probably didn't know that the old lady in front of them was Senior Mo Ing of the Night Luo Palace. Senior Mo Ing ignored Mo-Chi and continued. Apologize to the person beside me. Creak. Mo Xian clenched his fists. If he still couldn't tell that the old lady was acting for Qin Hao, then he would be a prince for nothing. But the word apologize was really hard to say. Junior Mo Xian shouldn't have wantonly played the zither in the city. Moreover, I shouldn't have sat so high up while playing the zither. I have disturbed your peaceful cultivation. Please forgive me. Mo Xian cupped his hands towards old Senior Ing. Brat, are you pretending to be confused? Are you not putting me in your eyes? Senior Ying's sharp eyes were glaring angrily as she spat out sound waves from her mouth. It was as if thousands of nightingales had descended upon Feng City, blotting out the sky and covering the sun. A burst of shrill cries pierced people's eardrums. Mo-Chi, Mo Xian, and the 3 Mara emperors clutched their hair and swayed madly. It was as if their souls and brains were being torn apart by the sound. Countless nightingales appeared in their minds, their claws like barbs, tearing and gnawing at their brains. Xianer. Mo-Chi was the first to reprimand Mo Xian. The higher one's cultivation, the more intense the stimulation. He knew that this was the power of Emperor Will. An expert who was about to step into the 9-star Great Emperor realm had terrifying Emperor Will. It wasn't something they could withstand. I apologize. I shouldn't have sent people to barge into other people's residences. I shouldn't have maliciously hurt people. I shouldn't have been arrogant and looked down on other people's dignity for no reason. It's all my fault. Please forgive me, Senior. Mo Xian desperately covered his ears with his hands. Blood flowed through the gaps between his fingers, but it was no use. At this moment, he felt as if his brain was about to explode. There were countless birds tearing at his flesh. Plop! Unable to bear it, Mo knelt on one knee before Qin Hao. This cry of kneel shattered the hearts of all the Mo Luo martial artists. Immediately, the ear-piercing screams that made people wish they were dead disappeared. Scram! Don't let me see you in Feng City. Qin Hao's eyes were red. If it wasn't for the fact that killing Mo would bring trouble to the Zheng clan, his sword wouldn't have just shattered his zither. Attacking Xiao Han meant paying with his life. You? Mo gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. Let's go. Mo Qi didn't dare to linger. With a wave of his hand, white gold Emperor Qi enveloped Mo Xian's group, as well as all the Mara cultivators and Phoenix fragrance brothel. They turned into light spots and disappeared into the distant sky. Zheng Qingqi, Mo Xian, will remember the humiliation you brought to Feng City today. When the signs appear, we will meet again. An angry roar came from afar. If it wasn't for his face, if Mo Xian hadn't only used his zither spirit, the white-haired cultivator wouldn't have been able to step in front of him. Not to mention 5 meters, he wouldn't even be able to get close to 10 meters. He hated him. This debt wasn't over yet. Qin Hao looked in the direction of the voice and curled his lips in disdain. From his words, it was obvious that Mo Xian wasn't convinced. But who didn't have a trump card? If they competed with their second origin spirit, once Qin Hao activated his dragon spirit, Mo Xian would lose even more miserably. Moreover, he still had his third origin spirit. Mo Xian had only used his zither spirit, but Qin Hao hadn't. Was it his fault that his zither music couldn't disturb his mind? With a demigod body and the art of endless samsara, Qin Hao wasn't any weaker than first-level Emperor Realm. When he activated his Crimson Lotus Tyrannical Fire and wielded the Void Sword, tearing apart Mo Xian's zither spirit was a piece of cake. Tui, a sore loser. Qin Hao spat. Young Master Qin, this is a sign of danger. Chapter 1341. The Eastern Continent's first princess over at the Noble Lookout Pavilion. Xiang Mo looked at Zhou Wudao in disbelief. What happened to his arrogance? Xiang Mo had already experienced how bad Zhou Wudao's temper was. If it had been anyone else who dared to challenge him, he would have already slapped them to dust. But when it came to Qin Hao, it was different. Even his tone of voice was strange. Qin Hao didn't say anything else. He naturally knew that Zhou Wudao wasn't confident. Otherwise, he would have already attacked. If the loser in the battle, just now, was Qin Hao, Zhou Wudao would have mercilessly stepped on him again. Qin Hao floated to Zheng Qingqi's side. Holding back his laughter, he said, I understand. Zheng Qingqi first glanced in the direction Mo Xian had fled, then secretly glanced at Zhou Wudao, who didn't dare to attack. He nodded and said, I understand. With you here, there's no need to ally with anyone. Qin Hao smiled and patted Zheng Qingqi's shoulder. He and Xiaogua turned into 2 streaks of light and flew back to the bamboo grove. Befriending Mo Xian was naturally to increase the Divine Palace's chances of survival. Zheng Qingqi hadn't gone to find Zhou Wudao because he had considered it from Qin Hao's perspective. After all, the two of them had fought fiercely during the Emperor Martial Tournament. If he tried a rope in Zhou Wudao, wouldn't that chill Qin Hao's heart? But after today's battle, Zheng Qingqi thoroughly understood that with Qin Hao here, the Zheng clan didn't need any allies. Wudao, who is that youth? An old man wearing a python robe walked over. His aura was very strong, not at all inferior to Mo Qi's. 7th ancestor, I'm not feeling well. I'll go back and rest first. Zhou Wudao turned and returned to the Noble Lookout Pavilion. You child. The 7th ancestor was stunned. He knew that Zhou Wudao didn't have a cold, nor was he feeling the slightest bit unwell. Just now, the white-haired youth had challenged him. According to Zhou Wudao's usual style, he would have already attacked. Looking at it now, wasn't that just avoiding a fight? Not to mention the southern region, even in the eastern continent, where geniuses roamed freely, there were only a few people who could make Zhou Wudao look at them seriously. Those who could make him avoid a battle were even rarer. At the very least, Mo Xian did not have such qualifications. Who on earth is this white-haired boy? What was going on in between? The seventh ancestor of the Zhou clan couldn't figure it out, but looking in the direction Mo Qi flew away, he grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. He felt incomparably refreshed. Hadn't he and Mo Qi fought for their entire lives? Today, when he arrived in the Southern Territory, he could only watch helplessly as Mo Qi was forced to the ground by an expert. Seeing Mo Qi's miserable appearance, fleeing like a stray dog, truly made him vent his anger. Take care of yourself. Zhou Wudao returned to the Monarch lookout tower. When he passed by Xiang Mo, he gave him a sympathetic glance before shaking his head and leaving. This was the so-called arrogant fellow that Xiang Mo had mentioned. In Zhou Wudao's opinion, Qin Hao was indeed arrogant. Not only was he arrogant, but he was also arrogant to the point of lawlessness. But this brat Xiang Mo actually wanted to trick him into attacking and giving Qin Hao a taste of his strength. Wasn't this harming him? Thinking back to Xiang Mo's words, Qin Hao didn't put him in his eyes at all. He deserved it. Not to mention Xiang Mo. When had that bastard ever put Zhou Wudao in his eyes? Brother Zhou, what's the meaning of your gaze? Xiang Mo scowled miserably as he chased after Zhou Wudao's back. Pa! In a remote mountain forest, a resounding slap suddenly rang out, breaking the silence and causing the surrounding beasts to frantically flee. This subordinate deserves death. Your Highness, please punish me. Zhong knelt on the ground, his hands nervously gripping the ground. Large amounts of cold sweat flowed down his face. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish. Mo Xian roared, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. He raised his hand, gathering his qi, an incomparably violent golden yuan qi ruthlessly pressed down. Your Highness, please have mercy. Please spare Commander Ants. Crash! Over 30 Devil Luo warriors knelt at the same time. Your Highness, little Zhong grew up with you. Although he didn't do his job well, he doesn't deserve death. Please have mercy. Gu Kuei also knelt down, standing in front of Zhong Ans. As one of the 3 devil generals, he often had conflicts with Zhong Ans, but he still had feelings for him. Your Highness, please don't think about his merits. Just think about his years of hard work and spare his life. Lu Bingyan was also angry at Zhong Ans, but her heart ached even more for Mo Xian's injuries. That unforgivable, white-haired martial artist had humiliated her Highness. You didn't even know his background before attacking. Did you not use your brain? No matter who begs for mercy, it's useless. Scram! Roared Mo Xian as he kicked Gu Kuei aside. Xian, that's enough. At the end of the day, we were careless and underestimated that Zheng fellow's strength. What's the point of killing little Zheng? Mo Qi, who was sitting on a rock, said while clutching his chest. His mind was still buzzing, and the blood in his abdomen was surging. Beside him, the 3 Devil Luo sovereigns who were meditating weren't that strong either. Mo Xian's raised hand trembled violently. He eventually gritted his teeth and dispersed his yuan qi. Spitting saliva and stamping his feet, he roared. Mo Xian completed the body tempering completion stage at 8, became a yuan master at 12, and awakened my second fate soul at 15. Ever since then, I've been invincible in the same realm. Even Zhou Wudao was nothing to me. When I was a yuan venerate, Father threw me into a beast cage and faced 5 bee sovereigns. Even then, I wasn't in such a sorry state as I am now. I had to kneel down and apologize. People have always respected me and feared me. No one has ever dared to stand tall and look down on me with disdain. Even when I was stabbed in the back when I blocked the attack for you, I didn't feel as much pain as I did today. I hate it. Your Highness, it's my fault. I'm sorry. Zhong lowered his head and buried his face in the mud as he cried. The 3 of them had been serving Mo Xian ever since they had been selected to enter the Devil Luo imperial family. However, the 3rd prince had never treated them as outsiders. Once, when they had been attacked, they should have risked their lives to protect Mo Xian. In the end, the 3rd prince had risked his life to block a blade for Zhong'an's. That blade had pierced his internal organs and almost killed the third prince of Devil Luo. After that, Zhong'an had been sent to the death row. Mo Xian had gotten out of bed with serious injuries and knelt down to beg Great Emperor Mo Luo to save Zhong'an's life. His Highness' talent was unparalleled, so the three of them understood his pride. They also knew how strong His Highness was. However, no one had expected that the weakest country in the southern region, Zhong, would produce an unremarkable white-haired martialist with such astonishing strength. Mo Xian, who had never suffered a setback, had tasted the most humiliating defeat of his life. As a prince, he had to kneel down and apologize. This was even more painful for Mo Xian than killing him. There was silence for a long time. Mo Qi didn't dare interrupt Mo Xian. His great-great-grandson had indeed suffered a great loss today. Get up. Mo Xian seemed to have finished venting his anger. He glanced at the kneeling Zhong'an's, whose eyes were still red. Your Highness has been humiliated. I deserve to die. Zhong'an's trembled, not daring to get up. I was wrong too. I underestimated my opponent. Take this as a lesson. Get up. Mo Xian stepped forward and patted Zhong'an's shoulder. If he hadn't been careless and didn't use his full strength, he might not have lost. Your Highness. Zhong'an was extremely touched. He hugged Mo Xian's leg and sobbed. At this moment, Qin Hao's face appeared in his mind. He gnashed his teeth in hatred. He swore that he would avenge Mo Xian at any cost. At this moment, a dazzling light shone from the arms of a meditating Emperor Realm expert. The expert's body trembled. He took it out in fear and said to everyone, "The princess is here." Suddenly, everyone's expression changed. They naturally knew that this princess was not the princess of the Moro nation. There were hundreds of countries in the East continent, and there were no less than a dozen empires. There was only one princess that could be respected by all the empires, and that was the beloved daughter of Empress Lingxian of the Great Qin of the East continent. Education 123 Literature Network. Chapter 1342. Translator. Nioibo, Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio Battle Platform of the Divine Palace. After returning to the Bamboo Grove, Qin Hao continued to refine pills and take care of Xiao Han, as usual. Under his meticulous care, Xiao Han gradually recovered. Occasionally, Qin Hao would take some time to train Sayogwa. He didn't take Mo Xian's matter to heart, but he was curious about the surprise that Granny mentioned. If he guessed correctly, Qin Hao believed that the surprise should be related to the signs of the Divine Palace. During this period, the southern region was in a state of turmoil and chaos. As experts from various clans came in batches, the various countries in the southern region also had conflicts. However, most of the fights stopped as they were under the control of the three sovereigns and four sects. The three sovereigns and four sects behaved normally. The opening of the Divine Palace was the grandest event on the continent. They were also secretly preparing and selecting suitable people to participate. On the other hand, the people of the southern region were a little uncomfortable. There were too many strangers, and they were all terrifying people. They had never seen such a scene before, so they couldn't help but feel uneasy. Not to mention at night, very few people went out during the day. The lifespan of mortals was only a few decades. They were considered old if they lived to 70. No one had experienced the opening of the Divine Palace last time, so it was reasonable that the people were timid. However, even they could vaguely feel that something big was about to happen in the southern region. As the days drew closer, Qin Hao could feel the tension in the outside world, even through the bamboo courtyard. In the past few days, he couldn't stand Zheng Qingqi's pestering, so he took Sayogwa out to visit Zhongjian, Arhut Palace, and Ningwu to deepen their relationship. Of course, no matter where they went, Qin Hao was warmly received by the higher-ups. They didn't dare to neglect Qin Hao for the sake of solving the Saint's Soul Pill. Not only the elders of the various sects, but even the Sword Emperor of the southern region and the Luo Emperor, who had reached the Emperor realm physically, personally came out to welcome him. At the banquet, they were full of praise for Qin Hao and called him nephew very affectionately. They were only short of appointing Qin Hao as an honorary elder in the sect, which made others envious. Qin Hao's relationship with Shou Wuk and Luo Yuliang had indeed deepened. They had also exchanged some martial arts with each other and had benefited a lot from it. As for Ning Wu, after Qin Hao arrived, Ning Chaofan led a group of people to receive him. When the disciples saw his master, of course, was more respectful and enthusiastic. The strange was that Prince Ning did Prince Ning Tianxing did not show up. According to Ning Chaofan, he hadn't seen Ning Tianxing in person for a long time. Ever since a group of strange people from the East Continent came to Ningwu, Ning Tianxing had never come out. Qin Hao didn't ask much about this. The situation was very dangerous, so it was normal to make friends with more experts. After chatting with Ning Chaofan, Qin Hao returned to the Zheng dynasty. For this trip, the Sword Sect and Arhut Palace's attitude was very clear. If they encountered any trouble, the two sects would join forces with the Zheng dynasty. This wasn't because they were deliberately showing goodwill to Qin Hao, but because they were forced by the situation. After the bloody battle in Jifeng City, the Southern Proud Xinyuan clan, the Herbal Medicine Hall, and the Spiritual Bee sect had already colluded and became grasshoppers on the same rope. The three sects had joined forces, and their disciples' abilities complemented each other. They definitely wouldn't cooperate with the Sword Sect. The Blazing Sun Temple and the Northern Proudly clan had recently roped in many experts from the outside world. They were extremely arrogant and had always refused to submit to the Sword Sect and Arhut Palace, so they wouldn't lower themselves to visit. Qin Hao was surrounded by Zheng dynasty's experts and had the support of the Knight Luo Palace. His own abilities were also very strong. His alchemy skills, swordsmanship, physical strength, and so on were all aspects that the Sword Sect and Arhut Palace needed. He was the best partner to join forces with. As for Ning Wu, Qin Hao intended to join forces with Ning Tianxing so that they could take care of each other. But that day, Ning Chaofan couldn't make a decision. The elders of the Ning family were also hesitant to speak. Obviously, they were avoiding something. Perhaps they didn't even have the intention to join forces with Qin Hao. Qin Hao didn't force them. Ning Wu's own strength was unfathomable. What was Ning Tianxing's cultivation? Qin Hao had never seen him fight. He guessed that he was no weaker than Chang Helo. Ning Tianxing was Ning Wu's only prince. All the geniuses in the clan would certainly follow his lead. They would risk their lives to ensure that Ning Tianxing could become a disciple of the Divine Palace at all costs. If Qin Hao came, who would he listen to? If he was in danger, would he have to divide a group of people to take care of Dan Ji's people? Qin Hao could understand this. A mountain couldn't have two tigers, so splitting up was a good choice. Divine Wilderness Calendar, year 9682, early winter. 3 days before the opening of the Divine Palace. A seven-colored light rose into the sky from a Narcissus Valley to the east of Feng City. At that moment, a bird's cry filled the sky. The people of Feng City saw from afar that a divine peacock had appeared in the void. The people of the city knelt down to worship it, saying that it was an auspicious omen. On this day, broke through to the Huang Plain. 2 days before the opening of the Divine Palace, in the same direction, in the Narcissus Valley, a fire beast roared and shook the world. The dog spirit swallowed 3 beast fruits, received the inheritance of the beast emperor, and broke through to the Huang Plain. On the first day of the opening of the Divine Palace, at dawn, the entire southern region fell into a terrible tremor. It was as if the end of the world had come, and all the countries were in a panic. Fortunately, the earthquake didn't last long. After dawn, in the center of the capital cities of all the small affiliated kingdoms, duchies, and empires, as well as the rich and famous big cities of the various kingdoms, there was a 10-zhang tall platform that looked mighty and majestic. Beside the high platform, there was a tablet inscribed with the most dazzling words, "Battle Platform." As a result, the Divine Palace was fully opened. What happened? In the Zheng clan's palace, Zheng Qingqi hurriedly put on a blue robe. He pushed open the door and saw that the palace was in chaos. "Your Highness," a high platform appeared in the city. "It's called the battle platform. It's very strange. The earthquake may have been caused by it." A guard rushed over and knelt down to report. The battle platform. Zhang Qingqi muttered to himself. According to the family's secret records, this was the platform where the South Pole Divine Palace selected candidates. The day had finally arrived. "Immediately invite Pavilion Master Qin to the battle platform," Zhang Qingqi shouted. He spread his wings and flew into the sky, landing in the center of the city. When he arrived, he found that there were thousands of people in the city. There were also elite Zheng soldiers, holding long spears, standing around the ancient platform. They didn't allow outsiders to approach. Qing Lao. Zhang Qingqi saw Duanmu Qinghui in the crowd and walked over. "Your Highness Qingqi." Duanmu Qinghui bowed and pointed to the ancient platform behind him. "I have inspected it. It is indeed the battle platform for the Divine Palace." The battle platform was a 1-versus-1 battle. If one wanted to become a disciple of the Divine Palace, this was the first test. Only by passing this test could a warrior be qualified to participate in the selection and step on the road to becoming a god. At the end of the road was the South Pole Divine Palace, the holy land of countless emperor-level warriors. "Everyone disperse!" Zhang Qingqi shouted loudly. Since it was the battle platform of the Divine Palace, how could the Zheng clan control it? This was a place for warriors to show themselves. "Your Highness, do we need to announce it?" Qing Lao asked. In fact, even if he didn't announce it, once enough time passed, people from the ancient families would know it was the battle platform. Zhang Qingqi shook his head and looked around anxiously. He found that Qin Hao hadn't arrived yet. "Let's wait for Brother Qin Hao first." Jiu Qian Divine Emperor. Chapter 1343. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio Stop You. There were no rules on the battle platform of the Divine Palace. No one cared about life or death. Anyone under the age of 30, from the Saint Realm to the Emperor Realm, could participate. 101 people could go on the platform in one round. 100 people would be eliminated and one person would be left standing. There was no fairness during this period. Saints and emperors were very likely to meet. It was not called suppressing the weak. It was all about personal ability. Only through the cruel competition of 1 in 100 could the last person be qualified to be recruited by the Divine Palace. But this was just the beginning. The earthquake last night was so violent that the land of the southern region seemed to have sunk. Feng City was not the only battle platform. Zhang Qingqi believed that hundreds of thousands of battle platforms had already covered every corner of the southern region. He did not care about other places. He had the final say in Feng City. After all, the longer he delayed, the more experts would gather at the battle platform. Who knew how many ancient clans from western Liang, Beijiang, Dongzhou, and the southern region were hiding under the platform? Now, all the experts of the ancient clans were gathered in the southern region, not including some who lived on the islands overseas. If Qin Hao did not come, the battle platform of Feng City would not open. Of course, 1 in 100 seemed cruel, but there were loopholes. For example, the Zheng clan could arrange 100 of their own warriors to fight with Zhang Qingqi. If 100 cannon fodders took the initiative to admit defeat, Zhang Qingqi would naturally win. It would be effortless. But this kind of opportunistic behavior could at most cheat a qualification. Once they set foot on the god's path, they would be eliminated by other experts sooner or later. It was impossible to reach the end of the god's path. Zhang Qingqi would not do this. Not only him, but the warriors sent by the Zheng clan would also fight seriously in the battle platform. They would prioritize defeating the experts of other forces to reduce Zhang Qingqi's pressure in advance. Now, they were waiting for Qin Hao and the disciples of Nightnet Palace to decide how to fight. They would try to avoid their own people and go on the platform at the same time. In the bamboo grove, "Master Melon, Miss K. Please let me go. My wife is waiting for me to go home for dinner. I'll be scolded if I'm late." The guard who was ordered to invite Qin Hao begged. He looked up at the scorching sun. He had waited for a whole morning, but he still had not seen Qin Hao. He could not report time. Isn't it just a meal? Don't worry, I'll fill you up. Sayogwa moved a bench to block the entrance of the courtyard. His whole body lay on the bench, his legs crossed and swaying leisurely. No matter what the guard said and how they would kneel on the washboard, they would not let them go. Turned around and looked at the bamboo tower in the courtyard. She followed her gaze and saw that the bamboo tower was faintly glowing, and an extremely powerful aura emanated from within. Qin Hao was at the critical moment of his breakthrough. Even if something big happened, no one was allowed to disturb his brother-in-law. At this moment, in the bamboo house, wisps of Dan Qi drifted out from the incense burners in the four corners of the room like a mortal mist, slowly winding around each other. Qin Hao was sitting on the floor, his long hair fluttering in the wind. There was a mysterious energy flowing around his body, and the Dan Qi in the room was being absorbed into his body. He closed his eyes, and the vital Qi in his dantian surged and circulated. The indestructible samsara technique pushed the wisps of vital Qi into each of his meridians, constantly cleansing them, broadening them, and strengthening them. Qin Hao's bones emitted a series of grinding sounds. His flesh and blood wriggled, and his physical body was constantly strengthening. At the same time, mist gradually formed on the left side of his body. The mist attracted each other on his skin, gathering into crystalline water droplets. The right side of his body was like a cooked lobster, fiery red, and emitting a terrifying amount of heat. In addition, there was a dragon's soul swimming above Qin Hao's head, letting out a low dragon roar. The dragon's scales on his face were faintly discernible, and his entire person was filled with an intimidating aura. Qin Hao's 3 spiritual souls had been awakened. In the few months that he had accompanied Xiaohan, the dog spirit, the old demon, and Ahe Huang were all cultivating in the Night Luo Palace. Granny Ing was the Beast Emperor. With her personal guidance, the dog spirit, and the Centaur brothers naturally took fewer detours. Just yesterday, had completely refined the peacock plume. There was a small amount of the divine peacock's blood left in the plume. It wasn't blood essence, and it was very rare. Even so, it had helped break through the barrier of the Emperor realm and step into the Emperor realm. The next day, the dog spirit ate 3 beast spirit fruits. Because it had been in contact with the red lotus fire for many years in the interspatial ring, its physique had mutated, and it became a fire dog. After that, it inherited the old beast emperor's inheritance, and its physique became even stronger. Moreover, its refining speed was extremely fast, and it quickly followed Er's footsteps and became a dog emperor. The 2 emperors greatly increased Qin Hao's combat strength. How could he fall behind? Now that the signs were about to appear, Dinda didn't have the habit of being a burden to others. He didn't want to be a burden to K.R. and the dog spirit. Therefore, since last night, he had been working hard to break through to the 7th level of the Exalt realm. Qin Hao's situation was different from that of ordinary people. His physical body was at the demigod realm, and he couldn't strengthen it for the time being. Moreover, he cultivated a divine rank technique and had a triple birth life spirit. It was much more difficult for him to break through compared to other origin soul cultivators. Not to mention ordinary cultivators. Ordinary cultivators on the continent could break through the barrier of cultivation as long as they had enough spirit qi. However, Qin Hao was completely different. Even if he had enough spirit qi, he couldn't strengthen his physical body. His physical body wasn't strong enough, and he didn't dare to absorb 12 strands of spirit qi. Otherwise, it would easily cause his body to collapse. Qin Hao had vaguely sensed this situation when he first entered the Hidden Dragon's secret realm. At that time, he had been puzzled as to why he couldn't break through the barrier of cultivation. It wasn't until he took care of Xiaohan that he discovered the secret. He was no longer an ordinary cultivator. Instead, he was a living god. Of course, The current Qin Hao was far from being a true god, and he couldn't unleash the power of a god. After all, only his physical body had transcended the mortal world. Even so, he couldn't find anything in the mortal world that could strengthen his physical body. This was because the nature had changed. The medicinal herbs and pills in the mortal world could only be used on a mortal body. If Qin Hao wanted to break through, he needed more powerful spiritual herbs. For example, spiritual herbs that grew in the divine realm. He couldn't go to the divine realm, so the only thing he could do was to absorb the essence blood in his sea of consciousness. In fact, since the moment his physical body was destroyed in the blood pool at Duan Long Cliff, Qin had been relying on the power of the divine blood to break through. However, he didn't notice it at first. Moreover, the amount of spirit Qi needed to break through to the king stage was very small, so he naturally didn't notice it. The amount of spirit Qi needed to break through to the venerable realm was much larger. If he couldn't awaken the divine blood, he wouldn't be able to extract any nutrients from the divine blood, even if he opened his 3 souls. Qin Hao roared. The spirit Qi in his body surged and spread to his limbs and bones, constantly strengthening his physical body. At the same time, 3 waves of soul power rushed to his sea of consciousness and hit the 12 strands of spirit Qi. The spirit Qi was greatly shaken, and the energy surged and exploded, invading the divine blood again and again. Gradually, under the continuous impact of the soul power, the divine blood emitted a faint red light. Outside the courtyard, in the blink of an eye, the sun set and night fell. Chapter 1344. Chanqian Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The battle platform opens on the west side of the battle platform. There was a burly man with a square face, straight eyebrows, thick lips, and a bare upper body. His muscles glowed with a bronze luster. At a glance, one could tell that this person's physique was extremely strong, and there were soul power fluctuations on his body. He was a rare expert. Beside the burly man stood a sexy woman with snake-like eyes. She was extremely dangerous, and no one dared to get close to her. Even from a distance, Zhou Wudao could smell a trace of the scent of poison from the other party. This woman was good at poison, and she also had soul power fluctuations. At the front of the battle platform, there was a horse-faced monk with a scar on his bald and shiny head. He was obviously not a good person, and was probably an evil monk. This person looked calm, and his eyes swept back and forth in the crowd. It seemed that he was also waiting for someone. There were also soul power fluctuations on the evil monk. These 3 people were more prominent, and they gave Zhou Wudao a sense of threat. They were the first to attract his attention. After all, there are not many people who made him feel threatened. There were also experts hiding on the east side and the north side of the battle platform. But in terms of aura, they were not as fierce as the burly man and the other 2. These people's performance was extremely abnormal. Each of them had a strong cultivation, but they were not like the others who forced the Zheng clan to open the battle platform. The selection list did not seem to be important to them. Then what was their purpose in coming here? Interesting, Zhou Wudao sneered. If these people all went up at the same time, they could definitely force out his Tao Tai soul. Today, there was a good show to watch. Open the battle platform. I want to be a disciple of the Divine Palace. Don't try to block my path to Emperor. It's polite to call you a senior. A senior should also act like one. I, Zhuge Tsunfu, want to go up on the platform. Let's see what you can do to me. The argument around them was getting more and more intense. The surging sea of people was like a circle shrinking. Some irascible martial artists were bold enough to step onto the battle platform. They wanted to see if the Zheng clan dared to stop them, and if they could really take the battle platform for themselves. Your Highness, we can't control it. Qing Lao saw that many Zheng clan guards were flooded by the sea of people. Once the situation worsened, it was difficult to deal. Let them go. Zheng Qingqi waved his hand helplessly. He had no intention of blocking them. He only wanted to delay them for 2 days and wait for Qin Hao. Release. If he went on stage, he would cause serious trouble for his big brother. Fortunately, this kid lacked courage and didn't want to be with his big brother. Xiaoguo became obedient and didn't say anything to provoke Zhou Wudao. He was afraid that if he went on stage and Zhou Wudao followed him, then Xiaoguo would definitely lose. Boring. Qin Hao was slightly disappointed. He secretly released his massive mind power and scanned the bodies of the 100 people on the stage. He discovered that his opponents were indeed very strong, especially the burly man, the sexy woman, and the horse-faced monk. These 3 guys were very troublesome origin soul realm martialists. However, they were only troublesome when compared to others. If Qin Hao's analysis was right, these 3 people's origin souls wouldn't be a threat to him. He really wanted to have a fight with Zhou Wudao to test his strength after breaking through to the 7th level of the Venerate realm. After all, during the Emperor Martial Tournament, Qin had been evenly matched with Zhou Wudao, who was a Yuan Venerate. In fact, Zhou Wudao had been slightly stronger at the time. If it hadn't been for the Scarlet Arrow, Qin Hao would have lost. However, at the time, Qin had been under pressure and displayed a cultivation base that exceeded his own by 1 heavenly cycle. Even then, he could only burn 70% of his dragon power. He had been crushed by his opponent's cultivation base. It was different now. Although Zhou Wudao's cultivation base was still higher than Qin Hao's, it wasn't 1 heavenly cycle higher. Qin Hao was currently at the 7th level of the Venerate realm, while his opponent was at the 2nd level of the Martial Emperor realm. The 2 of them were only 5 levels apart, so Qin Hao had a slight advantage compared to before. Furthermore, he could burn 75% of his dragon power, which was very terrifying. Furthermore, his consciousness wouldn't be confused. Even without the Scarlet Arrow, Qin Hao was confident that he could take on the Tao Ye's origin soul head-on. Therefore, he wanted to give it a try. Unfortunately, Zhou Wudao didn't give him the chance. You suddenly descended from the sky just now. I was careless and was knocked down by your aura, which made me lose face. However, this doesn't mean that I'm afraid of you. On the contrary, I'm actually stronger than you. The martialist named Zhuge Xuanfu suddenly roared as a halo of light appeared behind him. The halo of light displayed an 8 trigrams formation. He was actually an origin soul realm martialist. As his origin soul lit up, his aura rose steadily. Bang! Qin Hao casually threw a punch. The fist force shattered the 8 trigrams formation and hammered Zhuge Xuanfu's face. Zhuge Xuanfu let out a mournful scream as his body was sent flying 360 degrees and disappeared into the horizon. There are still 99 people left. All of you can come at me together, Qin Hao said in a low voice.